Hey guys, tonight, we begin beneath a silver sky where the rain has no urgency, just a soft, steady rhythm like heaven's lullaby for the restless. You're not rushing to sleep, not really. Maybe your body's tired, but your thoughts are still pacing the hallway of your mind, flicking on light switches at random. That's okay. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just here, and tonight you're invited to somewhere quieter. Out past the busy streets of your mind, and deeper into a dream space not drawn on any map. There's a garden that waits only for you. A clearing soaked in gentle rain, the kind that doesn't chill the skin, but calms the bones. And beneath the wide arms of a fig tree sits a man cloaked quiet and already wet from the storm. He doesn't mind. He's been waiting. He doesn't call your name. He doesn't need to. You already know it's him. His presence doesn't declare itself, it remembers you. Like the smell of old cedar wood, or the way your grandmother said your name when she wasn't angry, but a little sad. It's not just Jesus the teacher, or Jesus the miracle worker. Tonight, he's the one who waits in the rain because he knows you'd show up late. You approach barefoot. It's better that way. Shoes would only argue with the mud, and this place has no rules. Only warmth, only patience. And he looks up, not surprised, not rushed. Just like he knew the exact moment your soul would crack open enough to come. Unless you've got wings, or your soul already signed the guest book at the pearly gates, he says with a smirk. A soft one like someone who still remembers how to tell bedtime jokes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're still awake after this, drop your location and what time it is in the comments. I love knowing where these sleepy little journeys find you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit beneath the fig tree, and Jesus doesn't speak for a while. He just watches the droplets bead on your arms like little prayers taking shape. He's not in a hurry to fix you. He never was. He's here to be with you. Not to clean your mess, but to sit in it until it feels less like failure and more like soil where something can grow. He picks up a leaf and spins it in his fingers. The rain, he finally says, wasn't sent to drown your peace. It came to water what fear tried to bury. Then he laughs a soft, knowing sound. Though if it was trying to drown you, I'd have packed you a tiny canoe. His eyes sparkle even in the gray light. You wonder briefly if this moment is really happening. But he answers your unspoken question the way he always does, by being more real than doubt. His cloak smells like cedar and ash. There's a tiny hole in the sleeve where thorns once tore through. And next to him in the wet grass, the first light of a lantern begins to glow. The fig tree creaks overhead. Somewhere far off, thunder grumbles like a tired old prophet muttering in his sleep. But here in this sacred pause between rain and silence, you remember something your anxiety had hidden from you. You are deeply, extravagantly loved. Not because you're peaceful, not because you're perfect, but simply because he is, and he chose you anyway. You leave your heavy thoughts indoors, stepping barefoot into the garden of your heart. The door closes behind you without a sound, not locked, just irrelevant now. There's no need to bring anything with you tonight. Not the mental lists, not the old conversations you keep replaying. Just you, your soul, a little tired, and a world beyond worry gently unfolding beneath the drizzle. The ground here isn't paved, it's soft. Cool moss curls beneath your toes, and wet grass kisses your ankles, like the earth remembering who you are. Jesus walks ahead, not fast, just a few quiet steps in front. You don't follow out of obedience, you follow because his presence is gravity with kindness. He stops near a clearing and motions to the empty air beside him. This is where your soul usually sits, he says when your thoughts forget to invite it in. You glance down, There's nothing on the ground, no pillow, no blanket, just the sacred shape of absence, a kind of stillness you hadn't realized you were hungry for. He picks a fig from a low branch. Rain has split its skin slightly, and the sweet smell rises between you like incense from an invisible temple. You've been chewing on worry. He says, gently handing you the fruit. Let this taste different. As you bite the flavor, bloom's not just sweet, but ancient, like it remembers Eden, or at least an early draft of it. You half laugh, half sigh, and he grins. See, he says, even figs know how to repent from bitterness. You sit. No grand gesture, just a lowering of knees to earth like prayer without a script. Around you, the garden breathes. The rain softens to mist. Trees lean just slightly toward, the sound of your heartbeat, curious, like children peeking around corners. Jesus takes off his sandals and places them beside yours. They're worn, not from time, but from choice. You get the sense that heaven could have offered him wings, or clouds, or chariots of gold, but he picked feet that blister and ground that humbles. A drop of rain lands on your eyelash and lingers there, not falling, not fading. And in that pause, he asks you without words, what if this is enough for now? No fixing, no fleeing. Just sitting with me beneath a sky that listens. You feel your breath deepen. The kind of breath that doesn't need to accomplish anything. A breath with no deadline. Somewhere in the distance, a frog croaks, as if trying to remember the words to a forgotten hymn. Jesus leans back on his palms, eyes half closed. Some people think heaven is all trumpets and halos. He murmurs. But sometimes it's just not being alone on a wet Tuesday night when your chest feels too full to sleep. You smile without meaning to. The garden smiles with you. And just like that, your soul, long estranged from your thoughts, quietly returns to sit beside you barefoot, whole and unhurried. Beside a trickling brook, Jesus speaks without words, a gaze more ancient than storms. The rain has wandered off now, letting mist rise from the stones, like incense from an altar, long forgotten. Water drips gently from leaf to leaf, each drop composing its own lullaby. The brook babbles on soft, as scripture read aloud by a tired priest, and you walk with him, where the ground dips low and moss glows faintly underfoot. He kneels at the edge of the stream, cupping his hands into the flow. No urgency, no ritual, just a man touching water like it's the first time he's ever felt it. You sit beside him, knees pulled close, unsure if you're interrupting something sacred. But he smiles without turning, as if to say, you were always meant to be here. In that moment, there are no lectures, no sermons, just the sound of water, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle pull of presence. Jesus flicks a droplet at you, yes, really, right on your cheek. Too serious, he whispers. Even the angels don't frown this much when they're on trumpet duty. You laugh startled, and for a moment the anxiety hiding in your ribs loosens its grip. Humor light sacred is the password to his peace. He gestures toward the stream bed where something glints among the pebbles. You reach down and pull out a small shard of polished glass green, smooth as if once part of something broken. A piece of someone else's storm, he says. It floated a long time to find you. You hold it gently. It's warm. Then softly he speaks. You ever notice I never wrote anything down? Not once. No letters, no scrolls, just footprints and conversations like this. He doesn't sound proud. He sounds like someone who knows that words written in the soul outlast any ink. You ask, but how does it all not get lost? His answer is a glance upward where a hawk circles, and downward where the brook carries both your reflections in silver. Shimmer, a beetle trudges across a stone near his foot. That one's on a mission, he says. He's got no clue where, but oh, the commitment. He watches it fondly, then turns to you. Kind of like you, some nights pacing your thoughts like they owe you rent. You can't help it, you snort. And it feels holy somehow, the way that laughter makes the air sweeter. Then he grows quiet again, not distant still. His eyes study the stream, and you can almost see it. Generations reflected in that water, each one anxious, each one loved. I've watched every ripple he murmurs, since Eden. You ask him something without saying it. Maybe why do you stay near even when I pull away? He places a hand over yours. It's wet, calloused kind. Because your soul is a garden I made. He replies, and I don't abandon what I plant, even if it forgets how to bloom for a season or two. Behind you, the fig tree rustles again. Somewhere upstream, a deer drinks quietly, unafraid. You are not alone, not in the mist, not in your overthinking, not even in the silence. Even the smallest drops seem to murmur your hidden worries, and somehow he hears them all. They fall from the fig leaves in slow rhythm, soft like sighs from the sky. Each one lands with the gentleness of a priest's blessing, yet carries the quiet weight of things you've never said aloud. Not to anyone. Maybe not even to yourself. You glance sideways at Jesus, wondering if he feels it too. The tremor in the air, the way the atmosphere seems to know your name without needing to say it. He's sitting on a smooth stone now, watching the rain slide off his robe, like the sky itself is trying to cleanse him, or maybe cleanse you through him. Rain's good at listening, he says at last without turning. Unlike some disciples I know. His voice is warm, amused, but there's no sting in the joke. You chuckle gently. The sound of your own laughter surprises you. It feels like the first time in days that your spirit has taken a real breath. A raindrop lands on your wrist. It's cold. It's real. It's also somehow speaking. I know what keeps you up. Another one falls against your collarbone. I know the thing you never tell anyone. And another on your closed eyelid. You're not as alone as you think. Jesus shifts slightly and begins humming. No words, just a sound that seems to match the rhythm of the rain. It's not a hymn you recognize, not from any Sunday service or old dusty hymnal, but it knows you. It bends around your edges, lingers in your tension, and makes itself at home in the cracked places. You whisper, half joking, "Do you just read minds now?" He glances at you with a small smile. Only the parts you've tried hardest to hide. Then he adds, "Don't worry, your worst thought. Already forgiven. Your weirdest one, already understood." He picks up a flat stone and skips it across the stream. Makes 5 skips. One for each time you told yourself you were too much, he says. They all sink eventually. That's the point. A robin chirps high in the fig tree above. Jesus squints up at it. That one once dropped a fig on Peter's head during morning prayer. Nearly caused a theological debate about birds and divine timing. You laugh, not because the joke's that funny, but because it feels like you belong in it. The rain continues its whispering, each droplet a soft disclosure. They don't shout, they don't scold, they just land and listen. You close your eyes, and somehow you begin to imagine that your anxious thoughts, all those knotted sentences and mental checklists are slowly dissolving into the soil like forgotten seeds. Worry grows fastest in silence. Jesus says, but grace is the only gardener that stays for the whole season. You open your hands in your lap, not for any dramatic reason, just because suddenly they're tired of clenching. You don't need to know what tomorrow holds right now. You just need to know that someone sacred sits beside you in the drizzle, hearing every unspoken ache and calling none of them shameful. He lights a lamp, not with flame, but by the flicker of your silent fears becoming known. It sits between you both, now a small clay vessel resting on a flat stone, unlit by earthly fire, yet glowing with a warmth that feels curiously familiar. It doesn't blaze or cast shadows. It simply holds light, as if it was always meant to understand darkness without being consumed by it. Jesus leans forward, eyes reflecting that subtle glow. "This lamp isn't for finding your way out," he murmurs. "It's for finding your way in." You tilt your head, puzzled. He just grins. "Don't worry. Not everything sacred makes sense at first. Heaven's been explaining parables for millennia, and we're still on page 1. His fingers brush lightly across the lamp's rim, and the glow responds, pulsing slightly, like a heartbeat made visible. You notice something odd as your thoughts rise, the worry about tomorrow, that comment from earlier. The ache you haven't told anyone about the lamp glows brighter. Each anxious ripple from your mind seems to gently feed it, not smother it. "That's the trick," Jesus says quietly. "You don't have to chase the fear away. Just let it be seen." He places his palm flat on the stone beside the lamp, and you watch mesmerized as tiny carvings shimmer into view. Shapes, letters you're not sure. They swirl like water patterns in slow motion. "These are from others who sat where you are now," he says. "Some are prophets, some are peasants. All of them thought they were failing." A breeze lifts his damp hair as he closes his eyes. But light doesn't come from peace alone. It comes from the honest offering of unrest. A small beetle scuttles across the lamp's base, then pauses as if listening in. Jesus chuckles. Even bugs like bedtime stories. Though this one's been interrupting since Job's footnotes. You look again at the glow. It flickers not with fire but with remembrance, the way a good friend knows your voice without needing to hear it. It holds steady calm, not flashy, just there. Then Jesus says, "You ever wonder why I never built a temple with my own hands? I could have. Carpentry wasn't the problem." He tilts his head toward you. "But I knew I'd rather light lamps in souls than raise roofs of stone." You swallow hard, suddenly aware that this fragile vessel beside you may be the most sacred object you've ever witnessed. Not because it's divine, but because it's lit by everything you thought disqualified you from being loved. Rain begins again. Just a few drops. They patter against the stone, and the lamp doesn't flicker. It shines brighter, as if saying, "Even now, especially now, you are seen." Some scholars, he says, almost to himself, believe that Adam named the stars before he named the animals. That even before he had words for lion or tree, he whispered dreams into the heavens. You blink at him, startled. Is that true? He smiles again, but this one carries a mystery. Does it matter? The point is you were made to speak light, even in silence. The lamp glows a little warmer. Your fears still present now shimmer softly, like prayers waiting patiently at the altar of being heard. From beneath his robe he draws a scroll. It trembles slightly as if your name is written within. He handles it with reverence, not caution, like someone unwrapping a gift they already love. The rain slows to a mist again, more breath than weather. The sky above stays a soft gray, like linen soaked in twilight. You lean forward, drawn not just to the object in his hands, but to what it remembers. The scroll is simple, bound in aged twine, its outer edge flecked with gold dust and something darker, as if ashes had once wept there. Jesus holds it out, though he doesn't say so. You know, he's asking you to open it. Your fingers hesitate. What if you're not ready? What if it says something you can't unsee? It catches your doubt mid-thought. It's not a report card, he says gently. It's a record of becoming. You untie the twine. The parchment creaks softly as it unfurls. Inside, not neat lines of Hebrew or Greek, no angelic script carved in fire. Instead, the page blooms with symbols, sketches layers of meaning you can't quite decode. spirals, stars, river paths, a fig leaf traced in charcoal. And in the center, not a name, not even yours, but something truer, a feeling, a silence, a knowing. Jesus watches your expression carefully. Most people think I came to rewrite sin, he says. But I also came to remind you of the parts that were never lost. You point to a shape that resembles a sleeping lamb surrounded by thorns. What's this? He leans in. Ah, that's the moment you almost gave up but didn't. Heaven held its breath that night. You trace another mark. This one, a jagged tear through the scroll's middle. He nods. That's from a prayer you started, then swallowed. Still counts. His voice lowers more tender now. Some say these scrolls are written by angels. Others say the soul writes its own, one ache at a time. He grins. There's even a theory that I scribbled a few notes myself after your dreams. You half laugh, unsure whether he's serious. That's the trick with him. Every joke carries a truth too soft to shout. Why does it tremble, you ask, noticing the parchment still quivering slightly? Jesus lays a hand over it. The trembling stops. Because it's alive, he says. It grows when you're honest. It weeps when you lie to yourself. It dances when you forgive someone who didn't ask. You pause, then whisper, "Is there?" An ending. He folds the scroll, gently tucks it back beneath his robe. Not yet, he says. You still have stories to walk through. Dreams to return to. Grace to trip over. The mist thickens around you both, now soft and holy. The fig tree's leaves shine like wet emeralds. He leans close and adds, "There's a rumor in heaven that every soul gets to write one line in the final psalm." You blink, even me. He taps your forehead lightly, especially you. Yours might be the line that makes the whole thing sing. The scroll pulses gently against his chest. You realize something: this sacred record isn't just about what happened. It's about how much he was with you when it did. Jesus begins to read aloud a lost Psalm 1 that never made it to David's harp. His voice is low, slow, like moonlight turned into sound. It doesn't echo, but it settles like flour across a wooden table. The scroll remains hidden beneath his robe now, but somehow the words are still flowing, as if they rise from the ground or from the ache behind your ribs. The Lord walks in the gardens where forgotten prayers bloom. He pauses, lets the silence breathe before continuing. And he lingers where the anxious lay down, but do not sleep. The cadence feels older than language, something primal like the hush in Eden after the first breeze. You don't recognize the psalm, but your soul nods along, as if it remembers every word from before you were born. He continues. He binds the breathless to his chest. He braids the restless winds into lullabies. Even the dark is a servant to his kindness. A soft chime rings out. You look around, no bells, no temple. Just the sound of the water, adjusting its course like the stream itself is harmonizing with him. You smile. Was that really in the Psalms? Jesus smirks. Depends on who you ask. David hummed it once when he was too sad to hold the lyre. The angels tried to transcribe it, but half of it got smudged in their tears. You laugh. That doesn't sound very theological. He shrugs. Some truths are too tender for doctrine. Then he winks and adds, "Besides, scholars debate everything. One guy even argued about whether manna had a gluten-free option." You snort, then cover your mouth. He just grins wider. The air feels warmer now, as if the psalm itself softened the rain. Even your bones seem to sigh. There's something profound in hearing sacred verses that never got printed, like overhearing heaven's private thoughts. He places his hand over his heart. "I keep the ones no one else remembers," he says. "The ones whispered in caves, sobbed into dirt, or never spoken at all." You glance at him, and for the first time tonight, he looks older. Not weary, not worn, just vast, like time kneels before him, not the other way around. He closes his eyes and recites one last line. And when the soul forgets its song, the shepherd hums until it finds the tune again. The final syllable fades into the mist, like a feather into still water. You sit in the hush that follows, stunned not by grandeur but by gentleness. Some believe, he says after a while, that these lost psalms drift in the space between stars. They say if you're quiet enough, you can hear them echo in the breath between heartbeats. You tilt your head. Is that true? He smiles again. Maybe. Or maybe they're just waiting for you to dream them. Above you, the fig tree lets loose one large drop, which lands directly on the crown of your head like a soft anointing. Jesus chuckles. An ordained moment, he whispers. The rain resumes its quiet rhythm. But now it sounds a little like music. Trees sway not with wind, but in response, as if heaven's breath rustles in approval. Around you, the garden listens. The fig tree shifts. Its wide arms' vines curl just slightly inward, and even the moss seems to hum beneath your feet. It's as though the entire forest is nodding along to the psalm that lingers in the air, echoing not in sound but in sensation. Jesus looks upward, watching the gentle motion with quiet amusement. You'd be surprised how many things on earth aren't moved by force. He says, but by recognition. He gestures at a slender olive tree nearby. That one hasn't been touched by a breeze in hours. It's bowing because it knows you're here. You blink. Me. He nods. Creation remembers souls better than calendars. A nearby fern uncurls slowly, its leaves shining with collected rain. It's been waiting, he adds. Not for this moment exactly, but for this stillness, this openness in you. The breeze arrives now, not cold, not assertive, just a whisper that ruffles the branches like a mother smoothing the blankets of a restless child. The leaves clap without sound. Feels like a quiet applause, or maybe a welcome. Jesus stands and walks a few paces ahead. Wherever his feet touch the ground, brightens just slightly, not glowing but softening like dust, remembering the hands that formed it. I once told a storm to be still, he says over his shoulder. But I've found it's even harder to calm someone's mind. You catch up beside him. Why is that, he shrugs? Because storms obey out of fear. The thoughts, they want to be heard first. The trees bend slightly as you pass, not dramatically. Just enough that you start to believe they see you not as an intruder, but as someone expected. Jesus pauses beneath a cypress and leans against its trunk. You know there's a passage in an apocryphal text, very old, mostly forgotten, that says Adam once named the trees by how they made him feel. You glance around. What would this one be called? He touches its bark, the one who waited through all my silences. He smiles gently. A bit long for modern taxonomy, but it fits. Overhead, a branch lets loose a single drop of water that lands perfectly on the tip of your nose. Jesus laughs. That was coordinated. Fig's got a mischievous streak. You wipe it off, grinning. Is this whole forest alive? His expression softens. No, awake. There's a difference. Most things live. Few things stay aware. For a moment, the trees fall completely still. No rustling, no creaks, just presence. Jesus closes. His eyes takes a slow breath, then exhales through his nose like a musician preparing to play. Let the world around you see you're quiet, he whispers. It's not weakness, it's sacred. You sit again on the moss, this time not because you're tired, but because something in the soil calls you. A piece you didn't know you were worthy of is making space inside you. The trees respond not to your body, but your being. And for the first time in a long while, you believe that even your anxiety can be honored without being obeyed. He chuckles quietly at your surprise. Even Moss knows how to tease the solemn. It's not a loud laugh, more like the kind of sound someone makes when remembering an old inside joke with the stars. But it carries warmth, and it wiggles into your ribs in a way that nudges out a little of the tightness hiding there. You look down. The moss beneath your hand has formed a small bump. Not natural, more like a playful nudge. A little green hill exactly under your palm, as if creation itself decided to poke back. Jesus smirks. You've been so serious lately, the soil staged an intervention. You laugh a real one this time. The sound bubbles up like water, finding a spring it forgot it had. I didn't think Moss had a sense of humor. He kneels beside you, brushing the earth with 2 fingers. Everything made by love retains some of its maker's joy. Even fungi. You raise an eyebrow. Fungi. Oh yes, he says with mock gravity. Mushrooms are some of heaven's original pranksters. Once made, an entire hillside smell like bread just to confuse Elijah. You cover your mouth half in disbelief, half in delight. Is that in scripture? He leans close, whispering conspiratorially. No, but the angels still talk about it. The light through the trees shifts again, not darker, just softer, as if the forest knows you're not as heavy as you were 20 minutes ago. Then he grows quiet, brushing moss from a stone nearby. You know, some scholars believe that Aiden's laughter still echoes in the ground. They call it resonant joy. He hums a note, and it almost vibrates beneath you like the earth hums back. Others say moss grew so well because it remembered the sound of God's feet. He picks up a tiny twig and begins drawing gentle circles in the dirt. You don't have to keep rehearsing your sadness, he says without looking up. It's okay to let joy find you unexpectedly, even through moss and jokes. You blink. He draws one last circle and presses his thumb into the center. Not all healing comes from heavy work, he adds. Some of it sneaks in through things that make you smile when you weren't trying to. The moss nudges your hand again. Or maybe you just shift. Either way, it makes you laugh again, and this time you don't stop yourself. Jesus looks at you, eyes twinkling like dawn seen through tree branches. You were made for more than endurance, he says. You were made for delight. A bird above lets out a ridiculous squeak, not melodic, not majestic. Just a squawk that sounds like someone dropped a flute down a staircase. Jesus points upward. Even heaven has blooper reels. The trees tremble slightly, not with weather, but with amusement. As if they've waited centuries to see you smile like that again. You lie back in the moss, letting it cradle your head. It's damp, yes, but soft. Comforting. A blanket stitched by time. And as you stare upward at the interwoven branches above, your laughter settles into a kind of sacred quiet. Here, anxiety takes a nap. Just long enough for your soul to stretch out its limbs and remember it once knew how to play. He shares the story of an angel, so shy they whispered their hymns into dew instead of thunder. The tale begins gently, like a lullaby hummed by someone who's known you since the first time your soul flickered awake. You and Jesus sit cross-legged in the mossy clearing, surrounded by trees that seem to lean closer with every word, as if they too are eager to hear this forgotten piece of heaven. She never liked choirs. He begins. Too many wings flapping. Too much pressure to hit the high notes. You raise an eyebrow. Angels feel pressure. Jesus smiles. She did. That's why she sang only when no one was watching. He plucks a blade of grass and twirls it absently. Every morning she'd tuck her hymn into the droplets before the sun rose. That way, when people stepped out into the day, they unknowingly walked through her praise. You imagine it sacred melodies folded into dew, washing across sandals and stone and skin. praise too soft to be heard, but still powerful enough to be received. She once wrote a song so tender, he says it made a fig tree blossom 2 weeks early. You laugh. Sounds like horticultural heresy. Jesus winks. That's why Gabriel never found out. He'd have filed a weather report. The trees rustle with what sounds like agreement, or maybe laughter. Hard to tell. She worried. He continues that her hymns didn't matter since no one applauded. But what she didn't realize is that every tear of joy collected by heaven is traced back to her whisper. You shift slightly, the moss conforming to your weight, like it approves of the story. Then Jesus adds, there's a theory-old angelic rumor that the quietest worshippers are actually the loudest in eternity. You glance at him. Because heaven amplifies humility, he nods pleased. Exactly. Some theologians prefer to debate eternal reward, but I'm more interested in eternal resonance. What rings on after no one's watching? You look up toward the misty canopy. The raindrops on the fig leaves shimmer like tiny glass harps. So that angel, is she still around? He gestures toward a nearby stone. She was here last night. Left a melody behind in the puddle by your foot. You lean down to look. The water's surface is still, but something stirs beneath it. Not a shape, not a reflection, a feeling. One that sounds like kindness and feels like home. You ask softly, do you miss her voice? Jesus closes his eyes for a moment, letting the rain settle on his lashes. I never missed it, he says, because it's never left. For a while you sit in silence, but it's not empty. It's full of invisible hymns and dew-covered grace. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, she once rhymed mercy with mossy. I told her it was terrible theology. She laughed for 3 days. You chuckle and something inside you loosens again, like a knot that forgot why it tightened. The rain lifts just slightly. The trees hold their breath. And somewhere in the space between sound and stillness, you begin to wonder what parts of yourself might already be singing in places no one can hear. You walk with him through a wilted place, one he watered with tears until it bloomed again. The path narrows now, the moss, giving way to cracked soil and thorny bramble. It's not unfriendly, just weary, like a garden that tried to grow, but lost hope somewhere between drought and silence. Jesus walks ahead slowly, not pushing back the thorns, but letting them brush gently against his robe, as if honoring their attempt to thrive. You notice that even here, his pace never hurries. Grief, it seems, is not something he rushes through. This used to be barren, he says quietly. Every tree you see now, I cried for. You glance at a gnarled olive tree, its branches twisted like a prayer that waited too long for an answer. Even the ground has memory, he adds. It remembers when no one came, when the footsteps stopped. You step carefully over a patch of dry earth. It cracks faintly under your heel. Why bring me here, you ask? Jesus stops, looks around, smiles softly. Because you think broken places have nothing left to teach you. But they know your name better than success ever will. He kneels by a wilted shrub and touches a single brittle leaf. This one, he says, was planted by a mother who prayed for her son every night until her voice gave out. She thought the prayers fell flat, but I caught every one. You bend down beside him. There's a faint scent of lavender, though nothing here is blooming. It bloomed once, he says, reading your thoughts. Just not in the season she expected. Then he rises and walks toward a dry fountain at the garden's center, a stone basin covered in ivy. Its carvings faded, but still whispering stories. He places his hand on the edge, and water begins to trickle from a crack that hadn't flowed in years. How you whisper. Tears, he answers. Mine. And a few borrowed from souls who didn't know how else to pray. You sit on the fountain's edge mesmerized. The water isn't clear, more like soft gold tinged with memory and mercy. A breeze moves through the thorn bushes, and for a moment they seem to sigh. He picks up a nearby branch and draws a spiral in the dust. There's a teaching, he says, hidden in an old scroll they never canonized. It says some gardens grow only after they've heard a heartbreak. You frown. That's beautiful. It's sad. He nods. Most truth is, a leaf drifts from above and lands perfectly on his shoulder. He glances at it amused. Nature's way of saying, Amen. Then he turns to you, eyes serious, but not heavy. This place looks like despair, but it's actually resurrection in disguise. The tomb always smells like death before it smells like angels. You let that sink in. Around you, the garden doesn't suddenly burst into bloom, but a vine curls upward. A blade of grass pushes through the dirt. The kind of miracles that take their time. You run your fingers along the basin's rim. It's chipped, flawed, beautiful. So this is a holy place. He nods. Every place is holy when someone dares to feel in it. The wilted place is not dead. It is becoming. And you, sitting beside the one who weeps and waits and waters, begin to understand that maybe the parts of you that feel most barren are simply preparing to bloom. He likens your anxious heart to a bird that forgot how to fly and gently cups it in his hands. You've barely spoken the worry aloud, but he's already answering it. Not with correction, not with commands, but with a story told in his quiet way, like threading a lullaby through the back door of your soul. There once was a sparrow. He begins small, unsure born, in a season where the wind changed directions too often. It learned early that the sky could betray it. You glance at him. He's not looking at you, but up toward the canopy of the fig tree, where one branch rocks gently despite no breeze. It tried once, he says, to take flight. Got just high enough to see the horizon before the air gave out. He lowers his hands, cupping the space between them, as if holding something delicate. Since then, it's been walking, hopping, nesting too close to the ground. Safe but small, you stare at his palms. There's nothing visible there. And yet you feel the flutter, faint, desperate, familiar. That's me, you say, before you can stop yourself. He doesn't nod. He doesn't need to. Instead, he closes his hands gently, not to trap, but to reassure. Do you know what happens to a bird that forgets how to fly? You brace yourself. Then he smiles. It gets carried. A pause. The mist thickens slightly, softening the edges of the world. You realize he's letting the silence speak, letting your soul catch up to the truth it just heard. I'm not ashamed of your fear. He adds, voice lower now. It's a very old part of you. Comes from all the places you were dropped, left, or misunderstood. He reaches into the damp grass and pulls a single feather from the earth. It's wet, bent, a little dirty. Still beautiful, he says. Still yours. You frown. But I don't feel strong. He chuckles. You don't need to be. You only need to stay close to the one who is. Then he adds with a twinkle. Besides, I've seen sparrows boss around hawks with nothing but attitude. You can't help but smile. And just like that, your chest feels a little looser. He brushes the feather clean with his sleeve and tucks it behind your ear. A reminder. He says that broken wings still belong to birds. Then his eyes soften. There's a passage in the Book of Jubilees, most have never read it, that claims angels sometimes come to earth not to fly, but to walk beside those who've forgotten the sky. Do you believe it, you ask? I hope it's true, he says, looking at you with that warm, eternal gaze, because I like walking beside you. Somewhere overhead, a real sparrow chirps one note, brave and unsteady. You sit in the damp grass longer than you mean to, letting your body slow down. Your breath return to rhythm. The fear is still there somewhere, but now it's perched, not panicking. Seen, held. Maybe you won't fly tonight, but you won't fall either. He leads you to a hidden spring where Elijah once cried beneath cedars, doubting even fire. The path narrows again, carved between leaning stone and vine, not ominous, just secret. The kind of trail only appears when you stop looking for it. You follow behind him, your feet pressing into ground damp with memory. This place, Jesus says over his shoulder, has seen thunder, glory, silence, and a prophet who wanted to disappear. You both emerge into a hollow quiet, shrouded by tall cedar trees whose trunks rise like pillars in a forgotten temple. At the center, a small spring, clear and slow, its waters barely rippling. Elijah came here. He continues after he'd called down fire from heaven. After he won, you pause. He came here after victory, Jesus nods, because the applause fades, and anxiety waits for the silence after. The water laps gently at the moss-covered edge. You kneel and look in, not just your reflection, but something older, deeper. Like the spring remembers everyone who's ever doubted in its presence. Elijah sat right there. Jesus points to a flat stone near the bank. He asked God to end it. Not out of anger, just weariness. He thought he'd failed. You blink, but he didn't. No, Jesus says softly, but anxiety rarely listens to facts. It listens to fear dressed up like certainty. A cedar creaks above, slow and mournful. Jesus reaches into the spring and draws out a small stone, smooth gray, veined with gold. He threw this in, he says. Said it was the last thing he'd carry. You take it in your hand. It's surprisingly warm. I've left it here, Jesus adds, for others who reach the edge of themselves. You trace the stone's surface, thinking of all the days your own heart felt like it might cave in. The moments when even answered prayers didn't make the ache go away. Jesus leans back, arms resting behind him on the moss. There's a teaching, he says, passed down through old desert monks, that even the greatest prophets need somewhere to fall apart. You frown. Why don't we talk about that more? He shrugs. Doesn't fit neatly on stained glass. You sit in silence for a while, the spring bubbling beside you, like a voice trying to comfort without interrupting. Then Jesus grins. Elijah thought he was alone here. He taps your shoulder gently. But I was already sitting beside him, stealing figs from his bag when he wasn't looking. You chuckle. You're serious. He nods solemnly. And I watered his camel while he napped. Never told him. I like small kindnesses with no credit. Close your eyes. The scent of cedar deepens. Somewhere in the branches above, a bird rustles without song. But it's enough. This spring wasn't built to impress. It was built to receive, to hold tears without judgment, to whisper back "me too" without words. You run your fingers through the water. It doesn't try to change you. It just welcomes you. An ancient well for modern ache. Jesus says, you don't have to burn with certainty to be loved. You just have to show up, cracked, tired, thirsty. And you are, all three. But here somehow that finally feels holy. Jesus recounts the one time in heaven when God paused not out of powerlessness, but compassion. You've both moved now from the spring, following a narrow trail lined with blue wildflowers that seem to bloom only in your presence. The mist is thinning, and a golden hue begins to thread through the branches overhead, as if the sun is peeking in to eavesdrop. He walks beside you in silence. For a long time, his hands folded behind his back. Not hurried, not weighed down, but thoughtful, like someone remembering something sacred, something seldom spoken aloud. You know, he says finally there was a moment in eternity before clocks, before dust, when the whole of heaven held its breath. You glance at him. Why, he smiles, but there's something heavy behind it. Because God saw the first anxious thought form in a human heart. And instead of fixing it instantly, he paused. You wait. Let the silence settle. He could have erased it. Jesus continues. He could have redirected the river of thought or muted the pain. But instead, he paused and listened to it. Not to confirm it, but to honor it. You blink. God listens to fear every time Jesus says, not to validate it, but to understand what it's protecting. You stop walking. That sentence sits heavy in the chest, like truth wrapped in warmth. There's a verse he adds not in the canon, but remembered in some old Judean songs. It says, before God rebuked the storm, he watched it weep. A hush falls again. Even the birds seem to respect this moment. The breeze does not return. The trees do not stir. It's as if all of creation is echoing that sacred pause. Most people imagine God as reactive, Jesus says, as if he's waiting with lightning bolts or blueprints. But what if I told you the first movement of divine love is stillness? You sit on a fallen log wet with dew. He joins you, his robe folding like clouds at his sides. Sometimes he says gently, I do nothing, not because I don't care, but because your pain deserves to speak before I answer. A beetle clambers onto your knee, bold and unaware. Jesus watches it with amusement. Creation doesn't always rush to resolve. That's a very human thing. You chuckle, brushing the beetle away. We're not great at sitting still. He nods. That's why heaven teaches in pauses. You look at him. But doesn't the silence scare us? He shrugs. It can. But it also heals the parts of you that no explanation ever could. You think back to all the nights you begged for answers. All the mornings you woke up feeling like nothing changed. Maybe some of those silences weren't absence. Maybe they were compassion wearing quiet. Then he smiles, eyes soft. And for the record, every time you cried and thought I didn't come, I did. I just sat beside you long before words were ready. A squirrel overhead lets a leaf drop. It twirls down and lands between you both. Jesus picks it up, inspects it like a sacred artifact, then tucks it behind your ear. Proof. He says with a wink that pauses leave room for beauty. You smile. And deep inside, where the anxious thoughts usually run laps, something finally sits down to rest. You sit upon ancient rocks, and he explains how even stones record your silent suffering. The clearing you've entered now is open a wide circle, surrounded by standing stones, weathered and lichen-kissed. They're not arranged by accident. There's meaning in their placement, like a celestial memory map hidden in plain sight. These stones, Jesus says softly, have heard more prayers than most churches. You lower yourself onto one, smooth and cool beneath you. It feels like sitting on the lap of something timeless. He settles beside another, brushing his hand across its mossy face. They were here before kingdoms, before temples, before sermons in sandals. He pauses, then adds, and yet they still remember. You frown. Remember what everything that was said to them, he answers, and everything that was too heavy to say aloud. He taps a small groove etched into the stone next to him, that he says was carved by a woman who came here each morning and wept without words. The wind knew her grief, but the rock held it. You run your fingers along your own stone. It's pitted and cracked, but strangely warm. So, pain leaves a mark. He smiles. Always. But not always in the way you fear. Some marks become foundations. Others become melodies when the rain falls just right. He leans back, balancing on his hands. There's a tradition whispered, not written, that the rocks used in Solomon's temple were chosen because they had listened the longest. You blink. Listen to what? To heartbreak, to awe, to stubborn hope. He chuckles. To sheep complaining about grass. Everything. A small lizard scurries across your stone. Jesus raises an eyebrow. That one's the local archivist. You laugh quietly, reverently. The kind of laugh that makes your shoulders finally drop. The breeze shifts, and for a moment you hear something. Not music, not language, just a low hum rising gently from the stones themselves. A frequency your ears don't understand, but your soul recognizes. They don't forget, Jesus says. They just wait for someone to sit still long enough to feel remembered. He reaches into his cloak and pulls out a tiny chisel, hands it to you without a word. You stare. Me, he nods. You've earned a mark, one that says, I was here, I felt deeply, and I made it anyway. You hesitate, then press the tool into the stone, not to scar it, but to join it, to add your whisper to the cathedral of echoes already humming here. Jesus watches, eyes shining, but not tearful. You're not leaving wounds, he says. You're leaving testimony. Then he stands and offers you his hand. Let's go. The rocks will hold the rest. And as you walk away, you realize something strange. Your burden hasn't vanished. But it feels lighter. Not because it's gone, but because it has finally been heard. The air carries the smell of someone's prayer. Left halfway, Jesus invites you to finish it together. The trail ahead narrows once more, curling through low ferns and overgrown roots until it opens into a glade where the breeze seems to hush itself. There, suspended like a note held too long in an unfinished song, is a fragrance you can't name. It isn't floral, not incense, not smoke. It smells like hope that hesitated, like words that almost formed, but stayed behind the lips. Jesus slows, then kneels at the center of the glade. His hand hovers above the ground, where faint etchings mark the soil. Someone prayed here, he says. Not recently, but the words linger. You kneel beside him. The marks in the dirt are faint, a half-drawn circle, a word that ends mid-letter, a palm print pressed like punctuation. She was scared, he says quietly. She didn't finish. Thought God needed eloquence more than honesty. You whisper, doesn't he? Jesus tilts his head. No, he needs only truth, even when it shakes, especially then. He places his palm flat over the incomplete prayer. She started with, if you're still listening. And that alone was enough to fill a library. You blink, but she didn't say what she needed. He smiles. She didn't have to. Her silence was shaped like longing, and heaven speaks fluent longing. You close your eyes. The scent rises again, bitter-sweet, unfinished, deeply human. You wonder how many of your own prayers ended the same way. Paused not from disbelief, but exhaustion. As if halfway through crying out, you simply ran out of voice. Jesus opens his eyes and looks at you. Want to help me finish it? You nod. Slowly. Not because you know what to say, but because something in your chest has waited years for this moment. He clasps your hand warm and steady. Then you both speak at once, not in words, but in being. A pulse of soul, a ripple of quiet intention. The wind picks up, not sharp, not cold, just enough to stir the ferns around you into a gentle shiver. There, he says. She'll feel it now, even wherever she is. You're quiet for a long while. Then ask her all unfinished prayer still waiting. He looks upward. Some of them become songs. Others become tears that water someone else's garden. And a few just wait until the right voice walks past. There's a story he doesn't tell, but you feel it in the silence, that every time a soul breaks mid-sentence, heaven bends low and finishes it with kindness. A hummingbird zips by, pausing in midair before darting off. Jesus watches it, then whispers, even that was part of her answer. You smile. And somewhere inside you, in the place where your own prayer once faded, a quiet resolve begins to bloom. You press your hand into the soil next to hers, not to rewrite, just to say I understand. And the air scented with what was once incomplete finally breathes easier. A lamb rests beside him, but keeps one eye open, a reminder that even innocence can be restless. You spot it as you return to the main path, nestled in a bed of soft moss, its fleece damp from the lingering mist. Its head lies gently on its forelegs, but one ear twitches at the sound of your footsteps. One eye wide and liquid remains fixed on you. Jesus crouches down beside it with practiced ease, scratching behind its ear. She hasn't slept since the thunderstorm 3 nights ago, he says. Every time she starts to doze, the wind startles her again. The lamb blinks, then looks at you, not afraid, just aware. Deeply aware, as if it understands the weight in your shoulders better than most people ever could. You kneel beside them, watching how Jesus lets her lean into his side. She looks tired, you whisper. She is, he replies. But tiredness isn't what stops sleep. It's fear pretending to be vigilance. The lamb sighs, a soft, almost human sound. You recognize it because you've made the same one, lying awake at 2:00 a.m., staring at the ceiling, waiting for your thoughts to quiet themselves. Jesus continues, some think innocence means being untouched by pain. But even the purest things tremble when storms echo too long. You nod, like when anxiety doesn't need a reason anymore. It just stays. Exactly, he says. It doesn't always knock. Sometimes it moves and eats your cereal and rewires your instincts to scan instead of rest. You and the lamb share a look, a small solemn alliance of the quietly alert. Then Jesus chuckles. You know she once tried to outstare a rooster, lost in 6 seconds. Still recovering her dignity, you smile and the lamb blinks once slowly, almost a wink. He adds, there's an old rabbinic tale, mostly forgotten now, about a lamb that stayed awake for 40 days, praying with its eyes. The story says God called it Tefillah Be'aina, or the prayer that watches. You tilt your head. Is that true? Jesus gently lays a hand on the lamb's back. True enough that I remember it. The lamb finally closes her open eye. Not asleep, not yet, but trusting. Just enough. He leans toward you, lowering his voice. Some nights you're not supposed to chase sleep. You're just supposed to rest next to peace, even if your eyes stay open. You feel that deep. The permission to not achieve rest. To simply exist beside calmness until rest finds you. A dragonfly buzzes nearby, lands on the lamb's flank, then takes off again. Jesus watches it go. Even when you're still, the world keeps whispering, you're safe enough now. You reach out and gently stroke the lamb's ear. It twitches, but doesn't pull away. It accepts your hand the way your soul longs to accept assurance, hesitantly but hopefully. Tonight, Jesus says you don't need to feel peaceful. You just need to stay close to the one who is. The lamb exhales again, slower this time. And so do you. No lightning, no sermon, just presence. And the slow blink of trust returning to a tired heart. This clearing is untouched by wind, a sacred bubble, where even chaos forgets your name. As you step forward, you feel it immediately. A stillness so deep it seems to cradle your breath before you can even exhale. Not silence like emptiness, but like invitation. The air is thick with calm, not heavy, but full as if God whispered peace, and it stayed. The trees surrounding the clearing stand taller here. Their branches arch overhead like a cathedral canopy. Raindrops hang on their tips, motionless, not frozen, but as though even gravity respects the quiet. Jesus steps into the center of it and closes his eyes. This is where the noise loses its voice, he says softly. Even thoughts slow down here. You don't respond. You don't have to. Something about this place, this hush, makes words feel unnecessary, even a little disrespectful. Your mind, usually racing ahead or pacing in circles, now simply stands still. Jesus opens his eyes and looks at you. Want to know a secret? You nod. This place didn't exist yesterday. You blink. What he grins. It was made the moment your soul decided it needed somewhere to breathe. The Father knitted it out of stillness, moss, and a leftover breeze he wasn't using. You laugh quietly, unsure if he's joking or serious. As usual, the answer is both. There's a belief, he continues, written in the margins of a Syriac scroll that says, some gardens only bloom when anxiety takes a nap. But the earth makes tiny sanctuaries for restless hearts without them knowing. You sit down in the grass, soft, impossibly green, untouched by mud despite the rain. It cushions you like a memory of childhood naps you don't quite remember having. Jesus joins you, leaning back on his elbows. Do you feel it? You nod slowly, like nothing's chasing me for once. He closes his eyes again. It's because nothing is. Your fears took a detour. They don't like places they can't echo. You both sit in the quiet. There are no bugs humming, no birds calling, only the subtle rhythm of your own breath, sinking to the heartbeat of the stillness. Even heaven has these, he says, pockets of holy pause. We don't call them temples. We call them selas, not just in psalms, but in places. You rest your hands on the ground. It feels like resting your palms on the back of something alive, not pulsing, just present, supporting you without asking for anything. Then he murmurs, you can return here anytime you know. You look around. But how would I find it again? He taps your chest gently. It's stitched between your ribs, right there between the ache and the wonder. The clouds above shift slightly, letting in a beam of soft gold. It lands nowhere in particular, as if to say, you don't need to be centered to be seen. You lean back and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to stay awake inside this stillness a little longer. You want to memorize it, the peace that isn't earned, the quiet that doesn't ask for performance. And for the first time in a long time, your soul forgets how to worry. He gently confesses there was something Jonah never told, and tonight he entrusts it to you. You've wandered now to the edge of the clearing, where the trees part like curtains, revealing a slope of wild grass and distant hills veiled in mist. Jesus walks with his hands behind his back. Shoulders relaxed, eyes full of that thoughtful mischief he wears when he's about to drop a holy riddle disguised as a bedtime tale. You know Jonah, right? He asks without looking. You nod, swallowed by the fish. Ran from his calling, pouted under a plant. Jesus chuckles. That's the summary most people remember. But he left something out of the scrolls. He pauses, letting you catch up beside him. After Nineveh repented, after the storm calmed, and after the great fish burped him back onto shore, Jonah sat in silence for 3 days. You frown. Scripture says he got angry. Oh, he did, Jesus replies. But only after. Before that he waited, sat alone, said nothing. Because he wasn't sure if mercy had cheated justice, or if it had simply outgrown it. You stop walking. What was he waiting for? Jesus kneels and draws a shape in the dirt, a small swirl like a whirlpool, encircled by 3 dots. He was waiting to feel worthy again. He'd obeyed reluctantly, but still felt disqualified. You sit beside him, watching his finger trace the earth. So what didn't he tell Jesus? Looks up. That I visited him, that I sat down beside him in the dirt and told him a story about a lamb who ran away from 99 others just because it wanted to find out if the shepherd really would follow. You blink. Was the lamb him? He just smiles. There's a note Jesus says softly in a scroll kept hidden beneath the temple ruins, written in a hand that looks suspiciously like Jonah's. It says, "The mercy I hated became the mercy I needed." The mist thickens briefly, then clears again. Your thoughts stir not with chaos, but with realization. How often have you resented the softness shown to others, only to crave that very softness for yourself? Jesus leans back, plucking a reed from the earth. Some people think prophets are strong because of what they declare, but I think they're strong because of what they survive and what they're humble enough to leave out. The reed twirls between his fingers. Jonah never told anyone that I forgave him before he ran, before the storm, before the fish. You ask quietly, would it have mattered if he had? Only to the ones who need to know they're loved before they get it right. A crow calls in the distance, not ominous, just curious. Jesus looks toward the sound and nods slightly, as if acknowledging an old companion. Then he turns back to you. So if you ever feel like your worst moment has disqualified you from belonging, remember Jonah. Remember that even when you're sitting under a shriveled plant, arms crossed full of opinions and confusion, I'll sit right beside you anyway. You breathe that in slow and deep. The story doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. And sometimes the truth is that mercy reaches you, even when you don't know what to do with it yet. Jesus offers you a cup. It has no water, only peace that fills from the inside out. He leads you now to a stone bench, carved roughly as though it was never meant for royalty, but for travelers who got tired halfway through the journey. A single cup rests on its surface, clay unpolished with a thin crack running down its side like an old scar. He picks it up and turns it slowly in his hands. "This isn't for drinking," he says with a smile. "It's for remembering." You sit beside him, watching, remembering that you don't have to be full to be held. He places the cup gently into your hands. It's surprisingly warm, not like tea or soup, but like a sunlit stone at the end of a long day. And though there's nothing inside, the moment your fingers wrap around it, you feel something spread through your chest. Not liquid, not light, just stillness. Like a breath you forgot you'd been holding, finally let go. Jesus leans back, watching your reaction. "Most people ask me to fill their cup," he says. "But sometimes I'd rather make the hand steady." You smile faintly. Feels like a trick. He shrugs. Most miracles do. A beetle crawls across the bench between you, dragging a piece of leaf 3 times its size. Jesus watches it with admiration. "That one's building a home with leftovers, a sermon in 6 legs." You laugh. Does everything preach to you only the honest things he says? Then he grows quiet again. You stare into the empty cup, but it no longer feels empty. It's echoing something back to you. Your own tiredness, maybe, or the subtle ache of trying too hard for too long. "You don't need to be poured into tonight," he says. "You just need to remember that you're not leaking." You nod slowly. You hadn't realized how much energy you've spent worrying that everything good would slip away before you could hold it. That every joy was temporary, every comfort conditional. But this, he gestures to the cup. This is sacred because of what it holds by not holding. Peace when not forced, trust when not earned, love when it's no longer afraid it will be emptied. You glance at him. "Is this what you offer everyone?" He looks up at the trees, then back at you. Only the ones who show up thinking they've failed too much to be worth a second sip. He nods toward the cup. Hold on to it. Not because it's magic, but because it reminds you that even when nothing's happening on the surface, something deep is settling inside. The breeze stirs the trees above. A single fig drops to the ground with a soft thump, unbothered, unhurried. Jesus grins. "That one's for the beetle." You hold the cup a little closer to your chest, not clutching it, just grounding in it. Feeling its weight, its simplicity, its silent affirmation that maybe you don't have to work so hard to be okay. And as the breeze fades and the glade returns to stillness, you whisper without meaning to, "Thank you." He hears it. Of course he does. And without a word, he reaches out, gently touches the rim of the cup, not to bless it, but to bless you. He kneels to draw something in the wet earth, and you realize it's the first letter of your soul. The rain has stopped again, and the sky above the trees shifts into a soft shade of lavender gray, like twilight ironing out the creases in the day. The ground is damp, but firm, rich with the scent of pine and memory. Jesus crouches down beside a patch of bare soil and smooths it with his hand. Not rushed, not ceremonial, just present. Most names, he says, are echoes of something older. You watch as his finger dips into the dirt and begins to draw. At first, it's just a curved stroke, then a loop, then a mark that looks vaguely familiar, but not in a way you can place. It isn't the first letter of your earthly name, but somehow it is. Like the shape of how your soul feels when it's quiet. This, he says, not looking up, is the first sound heaven whispered when your spirit sparked into being. You swallow. Something tender rises in your chest. What does it mean? He looks at the shape for a long moment. It means beloved, even in silence. You kneel beside him, staring at the mark. It glows faintly in the damp soil, not with light, but with memory. A quiet gleam like the warmth of your mother's hand on your back as a child. Ancient, intimate. Jesus begins tracing a few smaller lines around it. Stars, branches, maybe even tears. Your story didn't begin on your birthday, he says. It started in the breath before breath. You ask quietly, does everyone have a symbol like this? He nods. Each soul has its own syllable. Heaven doesn't speak in alphabets, it speaks in essence. You glance around. Where do these symbols go? He grins. Some are hidden in laughter. Others in the way your fingers twitch when you're dreaming. A few get etched into places like this, just in case you forget. He adds almost shyly, I've carved this one a few times over the years. In sand and snow, once in the side of a clay jug in Galilee. I just like keeping reminders. A silence settles over you both, the kind that feels like home. The earth seems to breathe. Even the trees bend slightly forward, curious. Jesus leans back and lets his hands fall to his lap. The symbol remains untouched. Some scholars believe the name written on a white stone, mentioned in Revelation, is this not a word, but a truth, too deep for language. You trace the lines with your fingertip. It feels like touching your own heartbeat. Can I take it with me, you ask? He nods. You already are. It's been in you since long before doubt got loud. A small drop of water falls from a nearby leaf and lands perfectly in the center of the symbol. It ripples gently, then fades. Jesus smiles. Even the rain knows where to aim. You rise slower this time, the shape now etched, not just in earth, but in awareness. You don't need to memorize it. It's yours. And for the first time in a long while, you feel named, not by what you do or fail to do, but by the one who's been drawing your soul back to peace since the beginning. Looking up, you see stars that shimmer, but do not burn, old watchers of those who wake in silence. The canopy above has thinned, revealing a slice of night that seems to have crept in early. It's not darkness in the fearful sense, more like a velvet hush descending softly on the world. The first stars have appeared, and they do not blink. They glisten. Jesus follows your gaze, smiling quietly. Those stars, they've been waiting for this, for what you ask. For you to look up when your shoulders finally loosen. You lean back slightly, hands planted in the moss. behind you and stare at the unfamiliar constellations. They're not the ones you memorized from charts or childhood science books. These stars curve in patterns you've felt more than seen. Formations that match the shape of grief, hope, waiting, longing. The way a heart might try to draw its own map if it could hold a pen. One of them, he says, pointing, shines for the widow who never stopped setting an extra place at her table. He gestures to another. That one's for the orphan who learned how to tuck others in, even when no one had tucked him in first. You nod slowly, lips parted. They don't look hot or sharp. He grins, because they're not stars that burn. They're watchers, witnesses. Lamps hung in the firmament by the quiet saints no one wrote psalms for. You pause. So these aren't stars. He leans toward you slightly. Some believe it's not official, mind you, that heaven lets certain souls become light. Not to lead ships or measure seasons, but to remind the forgotten that they've been seen. A chill runs through you, not from cold, but from comfort. The kind that wraps around old shame and gently convinces it to rest. Jesus continues, "You've felt that, haven't you? Those nights where everything inside you felt loud, and suddenly you looked up, and it was like the sky said, 'I know.' You nod slowly, once on a rooftop, once through a car window, once flat on your back in the grass at 2 a.m., eyes full of salt and searching." He leans back on his palms and looks upward again. These stars don't ask you to shine. They just ask you to stay. A fox barks softly in the distance, the kind of sound you'd miss if you weren't still enough to hear. Jesus chuckles. That one's announcing bedtime. He's more consistent than any rabbi I've met. You smile, the ache in your chest softening further. Why don't more people talk about these stars? He shrugs, because they don't demand attention. They heal quietly, just like you've been trying to do. You let your gaze return to the sky. One star pulses faintly, not brighter, just steadier. It doesn't ask anything of you. It only offers its light, its presence, its unspoken understanding. Jesus murmurs, "You don't have to name your pain tonight. Just let the sky hold it." And so you do. You breathe in slowly. Let the cool night wrap around you. Let the watchers watch. Let the ache be seen and softened. He tells you of the one night when even sparrows cried and angels gathered their tears in gold. You and Jesus now sit near a grove of slender trees, their barks silvered by starlight, their leaves whispering stories only night can hear. The stillness lingers, but it has changed, no longer the quiet of rest, but the hush of something sacred preparing to be shared. He draws a small circle in the dirt with his finger, then looks up. There was a night. He begins softly when grief moved through creation, like a wind, not loud, not angry, just undeniable. Even the sparrows felt it. You tilt your head. Birds cried. He nods, not like people do, not with tears, but with the trembling of their wings, with songs that broke mid-note. He folds his hands in his lap. It happened the night before the cross, not just in Gethsemane, but everywhere. All of creation knew, even the smallest creatures. You sit, silently, heart-slowing. Something in his tone tells you this isn't metaphor. They huddled close together that night. He continues, perched along temple arches and marketplace roofs. They didn't sing to the moon. They just waited. You swallow gently. What were they waiting for? A sorrow they didn't understand, only felt. He draws a slow breath. They felt the weight of a world breaking open, and they mourned. A breeze moves through the grove like a sigh. Jesus adds, the angels noticed. They saw the silence in the branches. And one by one they came down and gathered those moments, not as feathers, but as something even softer, the ache of innocence. Recognizing sorrow, he glances upward. Some say heaven has jars of glory. Others believe those jars are filled with tears that no one else saw fall. You whisper, even from sparrows. Especially from sparrows, he says, because their tears carry no entitlement, just empathy. The night deepens around you. It doesn't grow darker, only deeper, like a well of memory. The stars overhead seem closer now, like they've leaned in to listen. Jesus continues. There's an old apocryphal fragment, barely legible, mostly dismissed, that says, God keeps the cries of the smallest feathered ones beneath the wings of the cherubim. He pauses. I've seen those wings. I've tucked grief under them myself. You glance at him. Were you afraid that night he doesn't answer right away? Then I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving them, the ones who wouldn't understand why love sometimes has to ache. He kneels again this time to gently brush aside a pile of fallen leaves. Beneath them, nestled in a groove of earth, lies a single golden flake, no larger than a petal, glinting faintly. He lifts it and places it in your palm. One of theirs, he says. From that night. You stare at it. It doesn't feel heavy, but it carries something unspeakable, as if it's made of both sorrow and gentleness. Jesus whispers, when your sadness feels too small to matter, remember this heaven, once bent low, to collect the grief of a bird who couldn't sleep. And suddenly, something inside you feels seen, not just your loud pain, but your quiet ache. The kind you've tucked beneath smiles, the kind no one ever asked about. You close your fingers around the flake. It vanishes. Not like magic, more like it became part of you. You are not alone in your sorrow. Even the sparrows once wept, and heaven called it holy. Together you walk into a memory, not yours, not his, but of the soil that once drank divine sorrow. The air grows heavier now, not with burden, but with reverence. It's as if time has folded in on itself, revealing a place not bound to years, but to feeling. And here, that feeling is solemnity. The trees thin, the stars dim, and the path leads downward into a grove whose roots know the shape of suffering. Jesus steps carefully slower now. His gaze is cast ahead, not nostalgic, not afraid, but present in a way that makes the moment feel like a sacred retelling. This is where Gethsemane remembers. He says, voice low, not the place, the feeling. You pause. I thought Gethsemane was a garden. He nods. It was. But gardens move. They grow inside anyone who's ever whispered, please, let this pass from me. A breeze stirs the olive branches, though no wind touches your face. It feels like breath from the soil itself. You look around. The ground is uneven, soft, in places, scarred in others. You kneel and touch it damp, cool as if it never fully dried from the prayers poured into it. There's no cross here, no thorns, no crowds, just earth that once held trembling knees and sweat like blood. He sits beside you on a low stone and lets the silence stretch. Most people imagine I was alone that night, but creation stayed awake with me. The ground, the trees, even the moon refused to set. You swallow gently. Was it the fear of death? He looks at you, eyes full of eternity, not death, distance. The grove quiets further. Even the insects seem to hush. There's a midrash. He says softly that speculates God wept with Adam, not when he sinned, but when he hid. Because the ache wasn't punishment. It was separation. You glance upward through the branches. The sky is soft black now, but not empty. Something above is watching, not judging, just witnessing. Jesus presses his hand into the soil beside him. This ground, he says, didn't judge me. It received me, like it's receiving you now. You close your eyes, feeling it, the weight of a sorrow you've carried for too long. The pain you've been strong through, the forgiveness you haven't believed you deserve. And in the stillness you ask, do you remember what it felt like? His answer is immediate. I never forgot. You sit there a long time not speaking, not crying, just being. There's comfort in knowing that even divine sorrow needed a place to kneel. Then he leans over and traces a line in the dirt, a curve that connects to another, forming the shape of a heart. But it's broken down the middle. This is what I offered. He says, not a perfect ending, but a shared ache. He presses his thumb into the broken heart. The two halves soften, blur, merge. You watch breath caught as the soil absorbs the shape, not to erase it, but to plant it. Grief doesn't disqualify you from grace, he whispers. It roots you in it. You rise slower this time. The memory clings gently to your ankles like mist. You know now sorrow was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to be held. And here in the grove where heaven once watched its beloved tremble, your own heaviness finds sacred company. He digs gently beneath the roots and reveals a sealed promise still warm with God's breath. The ground before you seems ordinary at first. A tangle of roots, fallen leaves, damp earth breathing softly beneath the weight of twilight. But Jesus kneels beside a knotted olive tree, fingers pressing into the soil like one reacquainting with an old friend. He brushes aside the moss and begins to dig, not with force but care. Like he already knows what's hidden there and wants the earth to feel respected as he uncovers it. You crouch beside him. What are you looking for? He smiles, eyes glinting in the fading light. Something planted long before either of us walk this timeline. His hands move patiently, palm to dirt, fingertip to root, until at last he exhales softly and lifts something from the earth. It's a scroll, tiny, rolled tightly and bound with a thin golden thread that hasn't tarnished. Despite the soil, it's clean, unspoiled. It even radiates a subtle warmth like a stone left in sunlight. You instinctively reach out, but stop. May I? He nods. It was written for you before you ever asked for anything. You take the scroll. It hums faintly in your palm, not sound, but presence. Your heartbeat seems to sync with it. The thread unties itself, and the parchment unrolls, revealing no ink, only a shimmer, like words that haven't chosen a language yet. Jesus watches your face, then says, that's because it's a living promise, not written in letters, but in intentions. Divine ones. You trace a finger across the glimmering lines. They feel like hope, and also like grief that's been held so gently, it learned to hope again. There's a tradition, he continues, hidden in the oral histories of desert prophets, that every soul has one sealed promise, buried somewhere in creation. It's not always revealed in life, but it's there, always waiting, always breathing. You ask, what does it promise? He smiles gently, that you will not be forgotten by the God who sees even what you bury. You clutch the scroll to your chest. Its warmth spreads through your arms, your ribs, the spaces where anxiety usually rattles around like loose change. It's yours now, he says. But don't mistake it for a fortune cookie. It won't tell you what will happen. Just that no matter what happens, you're not alone in it. A fig drops nearby with a soft plunk. Jesus glances at it and chuckles. Even the trees agree. They've been guarding this one for a long time. You exhale long and low. The kind of breath that feels like laying something down. You don't know what exactly the scroll will become, only that it's been waiting, and that somehow it remembers you more accurately than your own doubt ever could. Jesus stands brushing soil from his robe. Some people ask me why their prayers go unanswered. He says, but sometimes the answer was buried, like this, not lost, just becoming. You tuck the scroll inside your shirt, close to your heart. And for the first time in a long time, You stop asking how God will come through and start trusting that He already has. You both hum a tune that has no melody, and yet it soothes more deeply than any hymn. After burying the roots again, Jesus stands and looks up toward the canopy. A stillness settles once more, but it's a musical stillness, as if silence itself is listening for something to begin. Then, without speaking, he begins to hum. It's a soft, low vibration, not a tune you recognize, not even really a song. More like the echo of a lullaby from before the world had words. No rhythm, no chorus, just warmth wrapped in breath. He glances at you smiling with the side of his mouth. Go ahead. Doesn't matter if you're on key. You hesitate. But something about the moment, the way the fig leaves gently sway the sky tinted with ink and violet, makes your resistance soften. So you hum too, tentative at first, then deeper, slower. Not matching his pitch, but mirroring his presence. Together you weave a harmony with no destination, a sacred noise that doesn't try to be beautiful, it just is. Most people think worship has to sound polished, he murmurs between hums. But some of heaven's favorite songs were sung out of tune from people crying in kitchens or whispering into pillowcases. He closes his eyes. There's an old tale whispered by desert mystics that God created time itself while humming. Just a breath stretched across nothingness, vibrating existence into being. You let your hum fade, not because it ends, but because it completes itself for now. Jesus opens his eyes. You hear that you listen, but there's no birdsong, no instruments, just whine through fig leaves. Still you nod. Yeah, somehow. He nods back. The world responds to peace even when it doesn't recognize the tune. Then he adds, you ever notice how grief and joy sound almost the same when hummed? You blink, I haven't. Well, he says they share a key. It's called longing. The sound every soul carries like a background note. He picks up a small reed from the ground and gently blows through it. It makes no sound, just a faint, breathy flutter. Even this counts, he says. Every sigh is a song heaven holds close. You smile unsure while your eyes are misting. He continues walking, inviting you along with a tilt of his head. Sometimes when people say they don't know how to pray, I tell them to start with a hum, because it skips the mind and goes straight to the soul. You hum again, just a single note. It feels like opening a window. Jesus replies with a note of his own, not matching yours, not correcting, just joining. And for a brief, luminous moment, your inner noise, the what-ifs, the guilt, the exhaustion folds into that shared vibration and dissolves, not erased, just carried. See, he says, even with no words, we're still making something holy. The fig tree above lets fall a single leaf, slow and spiraling, as if moved by the sound. And you realize melody doesn't always require music. Sometimes it only requires presence. Jesus removes his outer cloak, and it carries the stains of 1,000 storms endured for others. The air has cooled slightly now as night stretches itself fully across the sky. The trees whisper less, as if they too are winding down. You and Jesus find yourselves near a flat stone, warmed faintly by the day's sun. And he pauses there, unfastening the clasp of his robe with quiet intention. He shrugs it off slowly, folding it across his lap. At first glance it looks simple, coarse linen, earth-toned, unadorned. But as the fabric opens, you begin to see it clearly. The cloak is not plain. Not at all, it's weather-worn, frayed at the edges, speckled with stains not of blood or dirt, but stranger marks. Water rings, oil smudges, ash-gray swipes, small handprints and faded dust, and something like the faint outline of dried tears that no longer sting. You lean forward. are those? He nods. Storms. Not mine, theirs. Yours. Carried, not erased. He lifts the hem and runs his fingers over a dark stain near the shoulder. This one came from a mother who wept so long into my side, her tears dyed the fabric. I never washed it out. He brushes another mark with reverence. And here a boy gripped me during a flood and wouldn't let go. His handprint stayed. You whisper, but why keep them? He smiles, warm and sad, because they are proof that presence matters more than perfection. A small ember of starlight reflects in the fibers as he lays the cloak across your knees. It's heavier than expected, not burdensome, just full, like wearing a library of unspeakable prayers. You run your fingers across one threadbare patch and feel your own ache reflected there. The cloak does not reject it. It seems to pull it gently inward. Jesus says, "Some think I only wore robes of glory, but I kept this one too, the one that smells like rain and smoke and sorrow." You ask quietly, "Did anyone else ever wear it?" He considers. "Only those who needed to know. I never left in their storm." He pauses, then adds with a soft grin, "I lent it to Elijah once, and to Peter, though he kept trying to dry it with his sleeve." A small laugh escapes your chest before you mean it to. Jesus chuckles too. You'd be amazed how many of my greatest followers were just walking contradictions in sandals. He folds the cloak back up and places it gently beside you. I carry the pain, but I also keep the evidence of endurance. You look down at the marks again. Some shimmer, faintly catching the starlight. Others are barely visible, like they're waiting for someone to notice them, to remember. Jesus leans back. There's a story not one many people tell that says, "When the wind tore my robe in the garden, the angels wept because they knew how many human hands had touched it in grief." He sighs, not tiredly but reverently. So he says, if you've ever wondered whether your struggle left a mark, it did. And I've kept it close. The robe rests beside you now, not as a relic, but as a reminder you are seen, carried, and remembered, not just in victory, but in every storm you thought no one noticed. He explains why heaven always softens its voice when earth is hurting, to let the wounded sleep. The stars overhead glow in a hush of silver, not sharp, not demanding. Around you, the grove leans into itself, as if even the branches know, now is not the time to speak loudly. The whole world has drawn its breath inward. Jesus watches the sky with the gaze of someone who's heard every cry, every whispered plea, every groan uttered through clenched teeth beneath hospital sheets, beneath blankets of guilt, beneath ceilings that never echoed back. You know, he says softly, most people think heaven roars. Trumpets, choirs, hallelujahs shouted from golden rooftops. You nod. Isn't that what Scripture says? He smiles kind. Sometimes, but not every time. Especially not when hearts are raw. He closes his eyes for a moment, then says, when the ache on earth grows too loud, heaven hushes itself. You tilt your head. Why he looks at you, not through you, but with you. Because silence makes space for pain, to breathe without shame. And because some souls fall asleep easier when they know no one's watching too loudly. He stretches out his legs. A fig drops softly onto the grass beside him, so gentle it barely makes a sound. There's a midrash. He continues, almost forgotten now. That says the angels once tried to outsing the stars during a famine on earth. But the stars dimmed in protest, not because they were angry, but to protect the sleeping. You blink. They turned down their light. He nods. Compassion shines quieter when wounds are fresh. The fig beside him begins to glow, faintly, not miraculous, just peaceful, like an ember that remembers it was once part of a flame. He places it in your hand. Sometimes rest is holy, not because it's productive, But because it's brave, you hold the fig gently. It's warm, heavier than expected. It feels alive. It is, he says. So are you. And heaven's whisper is meant to honor, that not override it. A small owl calls in the distance, not a hoot, but a sigh. Jesus chuckles. That one's on night watch. Takes his job too seriously. I've told him 3 times not to interrupt bedtime. You laugh quietly, and suddenly you feel something unexpected. Safe. He glances at the sky. When people cry out, "Where is God?" I'm often just outside their noise, whispering softer than their fear. You look at him, but what if they never hear you? He shrugs, not offended. Then I stay close anyway. I don't show up only for results. The trees rustle softly, but not from wind. More like an exhale. And then, he says almost to himself, "Even the thunder sleeps when a child of God needs rest." You lean back against a tree, the fig still in your hand, heartbeat finally starting to slow. Not because your problems are solved, but because something larger has leaned in close and decided to be quiet with you. The world doesn't need to shout to be sacred. Sometimes holiness is the hush that comes when your soul needs sleep more than answers. You notice a single unmoving cloud and learn it's the same one that shaded Elijah from shame. The sky is mostly clear now, a velvet wash of midnight blue stitched with the silver thread of stars. But one cloud, small, low, softly glowing, lingers just above the trees. It doesn't drift, doesn't darken, doesn't fade. It simply waits. You tilt your head. That cloud, it hasn't moved all night. Jesus follows your gaze. No, it hasn't, and it won't. Not tonight. Why, you ask, sensing something sacred? He smiles gently, because it remembers. You look at him, and he continues. When Elijah ran from Jezebel after the fire, after the miracle, after everyone thought he was unstoppable, he collapsed under a broom tree and begged for death. You nod. I remember that part. What they don't tell you, Jesus says, is that a cloud followed him from Mount Carmel to that tree. Quietly, steadily, not to strike him down, not to question him, just to cover him. He gestures toward the unmoving cloud above. That one. Your eyes widen. The same cloud. He shrugs. Time doesn't tangle heaven the way it does earth. You both watch it for a moment, suspended like a sigh above the trees. There's an apocryphal story, he says, passed down through desert scribes. It claims that some clouds are assigned to souls, not for signs, not for rain, but for presence. You whisper, Elijah didn't even ask for it. Jesus nods. That's how mercy works best. When it arrives, unrequested, a breeze stirs the leaves, but the cloud doesn't shift. It stays hovering, humming with quiet commitment. And you realize something in your chest. You've longed for that kind of love. The kind that doesn't leave when you unravel. The kind that stays even when you're not proud of yourself. Jesus picks up a stick and draws a small arc in the dirt. See this? You nod. He adds another arc beside it. Elijah called down fire from the sky, but he still doubted himself. Then he draws a line between the two. But the same cloud that once rumbled with power, later chose to whisper. He leans back. That's the part people forget. The cloud didn't leave Elijah just because his faith wavered. It stayed. To remind him he was still worth covering. The cloud pulses gently now as if hearing its own name, spoken again for the first time in centuries. You feel the truth settle into your bones. Maybe you've thought the covering was conditional, based on performance, strength, obedience. But this cloud, this presence, it stays because you're his. Jesus chuckles softly. Some say the cloud still shades those who don't know how to pray anymore. The spiritual wanderers. The ones too honest to fake it, too tired to keep pretending. You whisper, like me. He glances at you kind-eyed. exactly like you. The cloud remains above, silent, soft, unwavering. You exhale deeply your shoulders, releasing some invisible weight. Do I have a cloud like that, you ask? Jesus leans close, places his hand over your heart. It never left. Above you, the stars shimmer. But it's the stillness of that single cloud, ancient faithful, that makes you feel most known. He traces his fingers along your shadow, telling a new parable shaped by your silhouette. The moon has crept upward now, casting soft silver across the clearing, and your figure stretches long behind you. Not harsh, not sharp, but smooth, blurred slightly by the curve of the mossy ground. You barely notice it at first, until Jesus kneels behind you and places his hand gently over the darker shape that mirrors you. This one, he says, tells a story you've never heard. You look down, confused. My shadow. He nods, fingers moving slowly through its outline. It carries more truth than you think. Most people ignore theirs, assuming it's just the shape of light being blocked. But shadows don't lie. They tell what light had to pass around. You're quiet. The air feels thick with meaning. This, he says, outlining the curve of your shoulder in silhouette, is the part of you that always tries to protect others, even when you're the one bleeding. He traces along the dip, where your spine bends slightly in thought. And this, the way your back curves, it speaks of years spent carrying burdens no one else could see. Not sins, not failures, just weight. You feel something tighten in your throat. He glides his hand along the space your feet imprint into the moss. And these they've walked away from more than anyone gave you credit for. You turn slightly to look at him, but he holds up a hand. Don't move. Let it stay. Your shadow doesn't need you to pose for it. It needs you to accept it. Then he smiles, soft and a little mischievous. Want to hear its parable? You nod. There was once a traveler who walked always ahead of the sun. He feared what trailed behind him, long stretching unfamiliar. He thought it was a threat. But one day he tripped, and the shadow caught him. It cradled him like a friend, whispering, "I was only trying to keep up with your sorrow." You blink fast. The story isn't long, but it lands deeper than most sermons ever have. He continues. The traveler learned not to outrun it, but to rest beside it. And once he did, he discovered the shadow was shaped like someone kneeling, always ready to listen. A breeze stirs. Your shadow shifts slightly. Jesus places his hand on the moss, where your silhouette's heart might be. This is the part, he says, that always stayed soft, even when the world told you it had to harden. You exhale shakily, not broken, just seen. There's an old fragment, he adds, found in the margin of a Coptic psalter. It says, "The soul's outline remembers Eden." I think your shadow does too. The moon climbs higher, but your figure remains stretched across the moss longer than you expected. Wiser, wounded in graceful ways. Jesus finally sits beside you. Shadows don't mean you're failing, he says. They mean you're still standing in light. You nod, tears catching in your throat, but not falling. They don't need to. The moment already understands. And as you sit with your silhouette, no longer feared, no longer ignored, you realize this too is holy. The part of you formed by both presence and pain. The shape of you that keeps showing up. He walks ahead, and in the hush, between his steps, you begin to hear your true name. The path beneath your feet is soft now, packed earth with flecks of glimmering quartz that catch moonlight like forgotten wishes. Jesus has moved a few paces ahead. He doesn't call you to follow. He just walks hands loose at his sides. Robe brushing against the plants that lean in as he passes. His footsteps make no sound. Or maybe they do, but it's not a noise your ears can catch. It's more like a pause in the world. A kind of stillness that arrives, lingers, then fades again with each step. You follow quietly. No pressure, no questions. Just drawn forward by the space he leaves behind. And then you begin to notice something strange. Between the moments when his heel lifts and the next step touches down, there's a pause, small suspended, that hums with something alive. A vibration, a syllable, a rhythm you don't recognize, but your soul leans toward it. You slow your own steps to match his rhythm. Pause, lift, settle, pause. And in one of those pauses, one breath length between motion and stillness, you hear it. Not aloud, not external, but from within the deepest folds of you. A name, not the one on your passport, not the one you answer to in classrooms or text messages. This name is older, softer, like a chord played on an instrument made of light and memory. Jesus glances over his shoulder, eyes kind. You heard it, didn't you? You blink. I think so. He nods. It's the name heaven gave you before fear ever tried to rename you. You walk a little further, trying not to overthink it, but the name echoes gently now without needing repetition. It's not a title. It's not an achievement. It's a recognition. That name, Jesus says, has never been shouted. Only whispered between God and grace, when they were forming your soul. You whisper it under your breath, almost afraid it'll vanish if spoken. It doesn't. It settles deeper. He walks again. You keep pace. And with each hush between his steps, you hear it again, like a lullaby, composed for just you. There's a story, he says, that one of the seraphim inscribed your name in flame on the underside of heaven's veil, not to impress, but to remind. You ask, remind, who he smiles. You and me, and the silence when you forget you belong. A leaf falls from a tree, lands perfectly on the path. No crunch, just presence. People spend their whole lives earning names, he says. But your truest one, it was never a reward. It was a gift. You walk a while without speaking. The trees form soft walls around you. Now like hallways leading into the hidden center of a cathedral, no one built with hands. And still between each of his steps, the name returns. Not louder, just truer. Jesus pauses and looks back. Someday, he says, when all this is over and you return fully into the light, that name will be sung over you again, not to summon you, but to welcome you home. You nod, heart warm. You've heard many things said about you over the years, but nothing like this. And maybe you won't need to chase approval anymore, now that you've remembered who you are. He reveals an ancient prayer still unfolding, whispered by a soul 300 years ago who sounded like you. The path curves now, winding gently around a grove of stone pillars, weathered, cracked, half-sunken into the moss. You almost miss them. They're not grand. No inscriptions, no candles. Just silent markers of something holy left behind. Jesus places his hand on the tallest one, then gestures for you to sit nearby. This is where it began. He says, not your journey, the prayer. You settle on a patch of soft grass as he sits across from you, eyes searching the air as if reading a script only he can see. 3 centuries ago, he begins a woman, came here under starlight, not unlike tonight. She was tired, not the kind sleep fixes, the kind that comes from giving away light without ever seeing it reflected back. You nod, strangely moved, though you don't know her name. Or maybe you do, somewhere deep down. She didn't pray with words, he continues. She just placed her palms on the ground and exhaled. A long breath. And that breath became a prayer that never ended. You raise your eyebrows. Never. He smiles. Some prayers aren't meant to finish. They ripple. They unfold slowly, soul to soul, century to century, like melodies that choose new voices to sing through. The wind picks up slightly. A distant owl calls. The stone beside him hums softly, almost imperceptibly. Jesus closes his eyes. Her prayer was simple. Let someone someday feel what I never got, to feel peace in their own skin. You sit back stunned. That ache, that very longing feels familiar. She didn't know your name, he says, but she knew your ache. So she whispered that hope forward. And heaven's been carrying it ever since. You glance at the stone pillars again. They seem to pulse faintly, like they've been holding their breath for this very moment. There's a scroll, Jesus says, kept in the back corner of a monastery that time forgot. It speaks of prayers unsilenced by centuries. The monks believed that every prayer ever prayed continues its journey until it finds the one it was meant to comfort. You stare at him. You mean, this moment was shaped 300 years ago? He nods. Before you were born, a stranger prayed for your healing. Before your voice cracked under pressure, hers rose in compassion. That's how eternity works. It weaves us together with invisible threads. You look down at your hands. They're trembling slightly, not from fear, but from resonance. She sounded like you, Jesus says. Not her accent, her ache, her softness, her longing for quiet without emptiness. He leans forward, voice lower now. That's why you feel peace here. It's not just my presence. It's hers echoing forward, waiting for you to receive what she never got to hold. You whisper, "So, what do I do with that?" Jesus stands slowly and extends his hand. You finish it. You take his hand and rise. The stone pillar behind him gives off one final, barely audible hum, like a bell rung by memory. As you walk forward, you feel it, a prayer still unfolding, blooming inside you, like a letter finally read. And though you've never met her, you know one thing for sure. Somewhere in heaven, she is smiling. Jesus shares a moment when he laughed so freely, even the Pharisees paused in confusion. The air feels lighter here, the path widening into a clearing that almost sparkles with mischief. It's not that anything in creation looks different. The trees are still tall, the stars still whispering, but something in Jesus' posture shifts. He walks with a bounce now, a grin playing at the corners of his mouth. You raise an eyebrow. You're smiling. He smirks. I was just remembering the time I laughed so loud, the Pharisees dropped their scrolls. You blink. You laughed at them. Oh no, he says quickly. With them, they just didn't know it at the time. You sit on a moss-covered log, intrigued. Okay, tell me. He takes a deep breath. It was near the temple steps. A young boy had asked me dead serious. If a camel can't fit through the eye of a needle, does that mean I have to shrink before God lets me in? You chuckle. That's actually kind of brilliant. Jesus nods, eyes gleaming. It is. But before I could answer, one of the Pharisees muttered something about blasphemy and unclean imagery. He pauses, then grins. So I told him, well, I hope heaven has a good tailor, because clearly humility doesn't fit over your robe. You burst out laughing. Jesus does too, shoulders shaking with quiet joy. For a moment, he's not teacher, not Messiah, just a friend who remembers something absurd and precious. He continues. The Pharisee didn't know what to do. He froze. Then said, "That's not in the law." I said, "Neither is joy, but you still act allergic to it. You wipe a tear from your eye. Please tell me someone wrote that down." "Only John," he says. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his fish. You imagine it, robes, fluttering scrolls, scattered a holy scene of sacred confusion. And at the center, a savior who laughed because he wasn't trying to impress anyone. Jesus adds, "Sometimes my laugh did more than my parables. People listened differently when they saw I wasn't here just to rebuke, but to rejoice." He turns more serious now, but not somber. "You've tried so hard to be solemn for God. But I made joy too. You nod slowly. I think I forgot that part. Many do, he says, especially when pain sticks around too long. But laughter is part of healing. It's permission to let the light back in, even if the wounds aren't fully closed. A squirrel drops a nut from above. It hits the log beside you with a hollow thunk. Jesus looks up and says, "That was aimed." You both burst out laughing again. He wipes his eye with his sleeve. Heaven won't test you on theology, but it will remember the way you laughed when love caught you off guard. There's a hush now, not because the moment's over, but because it's settling in. The joy, the memory, the permission. Jesus sits beside you, still grinning. So next time your anxious mind tells you, God expects perfection, just remember, I once laughed so hard a Pharisee reevaluated his worldview. You shake your head in wonder. And somehow in the warmth of this laughter, shared under a moonlit sky, you begin to believe that healing might not always start with a breakthrough, but with a breathless giggle you didn't expect. At the center of the clearing lies a pool beneath its surface. A flame flickers upside down. You arrive with Jesus in a quiet basin surrounded by low stones, perfectly round, almost forgotten by time. The water in the pool is still eerily still, not a ripple, not a sound. It reflects the sky so perfectly, it takes you a moment to realize it's not just reflection. Something is moving beneath the surface. You kneel at the edge and peer in. What you see doesn't make immediate sense. It's a flame, upright but inverted, dancing gently as if tethered to the pool's bottom by an invisible wick. Soft gold, steady blue at its base, flickering without smoke. And yet the water remains calm. Jesus watches your face with that half smile of his. You see it, don't you? You nod slowly. Why is there fire under the water? He crouches beside you. Because some truths don't obey gravity. The flame flickers steady but shy. It casts no reflection above, no heat to your face. Just light, strange, sacred light. He continues, this fire doesn't burn. It remembers. You frown. Remembers what Jesus leans closer to the pool, tapping the surface gently with one finger. It doesn't break, it welcomes. The ring of a ripple pulses out soft as a breath. It remembers every time you almost gave up and didn't. You sit back slightly. That many he nods, more than you think. Every quiet endurance, every whispered help, every time you walked into a room full of light while carrying your shadows. A silence. Deep. Full. There's a legend, he says, buried in a scroll found near Mount Arbel that speaks of the Esh Hafuch, the inverted flame. A light placed beneath still water by God himself, not to guide travelers, but to comfort the one who no longer believed they were glowing. You glance at him. So this is mine. He shrugs. Not just yours. But tonight, yes, it's burning on your behalf. The flame dances gently beneath the surface. It doesn't demand attention. It simply endures. It holds. It testifies. You feel something shift inside you. A tension you didn't know you were carrying loosens. Jesus whispers, peace isn't always the absence of fire. Sometimes it's the miracle of flame that chooses not to consume. You lean forward and notice something else. Faint images swirling around the base of the flame, like tiny memories caught in smoke. A child's prayer, a hospital hallway, a rainstorm and a hand you almost reached for. All gently held, not judged, just seen. He speaks again. You think you've been invisible, walking through hard days with your shoulders down and your words tucked away. But even here underwater, under silence, your light kept burning. You look up, eyes full. He places a hand on your shoulder. Not all miracles shout. Some simply keep flickering, long after you forgot they were lit. You exhale slow and full, and as the flame beneath the pool dances in your quiet, you begin to believe maybe endurance is a kind of holiness. Maybe not giving up is the prayer you didn't know you'd been praying all along. He begins to tell you a story he's never shared with anyone else, not even the prophets. You and Jesus now sit by the edge of the quiet pool, the inverted flame still dancing beneath the surface, like a promise that doesn't need applause. The night deepens, not with darkness, but with intimacy, the kind that settles when trust has grown roots. He leans back on one hand, staring into the branches overhead. Then, after a pause, he says, "There's a story I've never told." You glance at him surprised. "Never," he nods. "Not even to Moses, not to Isaiah, not to Mary." You wait. You don't ask. You just listen. He exhales slowly. "It happened before time began, before the first atoms spun, before light split darkness, before angels learned harmony." He glances sideways at you. That's when God had a thought. Not a command, not a decree. Just a thought. You lean in quiet. The thought was you. You blink. Me. He nods. But not just you. The feeling of you. The texture of your laugh. The ache behind your sarcasm. The shape your silence would take in a room full of noise. You sit very still. He continues. And for the briefest moment in that eternal beginning, all of heaven paused. Because this soul yours wasn't just designed. It was longed for. You swallow hard. "Why haven't you ever told anyone?" He shrugs. "Because most wouldn't believe me. They theologize it, argue doctrine, turn it into a footnote." He picks up a small pebble and tosses it into the pool. It doesn't disturb the flame beneath it, only ripples around it like applause. "But you've been listening with your heart tonight, so I can finally say it." Then he lowers his voice. "There's a rumor among the stars that when your soul was first dreamt, it sang a note so pure that the seraphim stopped mid-rehearsal." You laugh softly, unsure if he's teasing. But something about his eyes tells you this is his most playful truth. There's even a gap. He adds in the oldest hymn scrolls, a space left blank reserved for a sound they couldn't quite capture. Scholars debated it for centuries. I never told them it was your note. You let that sink in. The God of galaxies kept something sacred just for you. You carry it still, he says. Not in pitch, in presence. You close your eyes. That ache you've always carried, the one that made you feel like you didn't quite fit, didn't quite belong, starts to feel less like a wound and more like a secret garden. You've felt it, haven't you? He asks. That tug when you hear certain songs that pull toward quiet rivers or books you can't explain. You nod slowly. That's the echo, he says, of what your soul once sang when it was first imagined. A breeze moves through the clearing, now warm, weightless. It brushes your face like a parent tucking you in. He smiles again. I've waited a long time to tell you this. You smile back. I'm glad you did. He leans back, folds his hands behind his head, and gazes upward. And you sit beside him, the only soul in all creation who's just heard that story, the one whispered before time began and entrusted tonight to you. You're invited to speak aloud one thing you've never dared say to God, and the stars hold it without judgment. The silence is rich now, not empty but pregnant with invitation. Jesus remains reclined, hands behind his head, eyes scanning the constellations above as if they were old hymns printed in the sky. He doesn't turn to you, but his voice carries. You know what this moment is for, don't you? You hesitate. I think so. It's time. He says softly, for you to say the thing you've never said. You look down. The moss beneath your fingers is cool, grounding. What if I'm not ready? He tilts his head slightly, still not looking. Then whisper it, even if only part of it. Your chest tightens. That old ache. The one you keep wrapped in disclaimers, and spiritual politeness. The one you never dare put into words, because what if it offends him? What if it unravels everything? Still, something about the stillness makes you brave. You inhale, and slowly, carefully you let the words rise. A single sentence, a raw truth, a wound unspoken until now. It leaves your lips like a feather caught on breath, weightless, and yet impossibly heavy. And the moment it's out there, you freeze. But nothing shatters. The stars do not fall. The trees do not recoil. The fig leaves do not curl. The flame beneath the pool does not flicker. Instead, everything leans closer. Jesus' eyes, still fixed on the sky, lets out a long breath. There it is. You glance at him. Aren't you disappointed? He finally turns to meet your gaze. I waited for that. You blink fast. But I thought I wasn't allowed to say things like that to God. He sits up slowly, brushing moss from his sleeve. Do you really think David got away with the Psalms by sugarcoating his grief? You laugh nervously. Jesus continues. What you just said. That wasn't rebellion. That was intimacy. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. There's an old teaching, he adds. Hidden in the margins of the Aleppo Codex, barely legible. But it says, the soul is nearest to God when it forgets to edit its ache. You whisper, so I didn't mess up. He places a hand over your chest, not heavy, just there. You opened a door you thought was locked. And behind it was a father who's been kneeling outside it all along. You look up, and then you notice something in the sky, a small star dim, until now begins to shimmer slightly brighter. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. What's that, you ask? Jesus smiles. That one's been listening to your silence for years. Tonight it heard your truth. You exhale again. This time it feels freeing. Like the weight you confessed wasn't just released, it was received. You glance down at your hands. They look the same, but something beneath your skin has softened. And the stars, they don't judge. They don't scold. They simply shine as if your honesty made the night sky a little more complete. Jesus leans back again, voice warm with peace. You didn't lose anything by telling the truth. You gained space. And there, beneath the breath of heaven, beside the quiet flame, and the fig trees that never once recoiled, you finally learn what trust really sounds like. A single sentence. Spoken in love. Heard in full. He lets you ask one question, any question, and promises not to answer with a riddle. The stillness lingers warm and weightless. A soft hush in the grove, where even the trees seem to hold their breath. Jesus sits beside you, the moss-strewn ground, cradling the moment like an open palm. He turns to you now, fully, knees angled toward yours. His eyes don't shimmer with mystery this time, just clarity. All right, he says gently. Your turn. You blink. My turn for a question. He replies. Any question. No parables, no metaphors. No, the kingdom of heaven is like just me and you and a straight answer. You hesitate. Even the heavy ones, he smiles, especially the heavy ones. Your mind floods instantly. You've carried so many questions, the kind that didn't make it into your prayers, because you were afraid they'd sound ungrateful, or too angry, or just too tired. Jesus leans back, crossing one leg. You're not going to break me, you know. You laugh once, small and dry. Okay, you take a breath. Another. Then ask the one that's been sitting in your ribs for years. What if I never feel close to you again? He doesn't blink. He doesn't sigh. He just lets your question sit sacred, honest, whole. Then he says, you don't have to feel me to have me. You nod slowly, but he leans in. No, listen. Feelings are real, but they're not permanent. They're weather systems, not architecture. He picks up a smooth stone and holds it in his palm. You think I vanish when you're numb, but I don't live inside your emotions. I live inside your existence. He tosses the stone gently, skips once across the pond and vanishes. Your silence isn't proof of my absence. It's space for deeper anchoring. You ask, but what about people who do feel you? Why do I always feel like I'm outside the warmth? His eyes are kind but unwavering, because your soul processes love through stillness, not sparks. You're not broken. You're just wired for steady fires, not lightning bolts. He adds, you've mistaken quiet for distance, but I've been closer than breath, even in the silence. You whisper, so I'm not forgotten. He shakes his head slowly. You are engraved. On the palms of my hands, remember, not penciled in. Engraved. A long pause stretches out. No rush to fill it. Just understanding slowly unfurling like morning light through fog. Do you want another? He asks. You smile faintly. I thought I only got one. He shrugs. I said I wouldn't answer in riddles. I didn't say I'd limit the conversation. You look away, eyes misted. That was the one I needed. Jesus nods. Then it was the right one. A fig falls behind you with a soft thud. Somewhere above, a bird sings exactly one note, then stops. You exhale. The question didn't solve everything, but it didn't need to. It simply mattered. And now you know God can handle your hardest questions. And sometimes he even answers them without a single metaphor. You ask what he remembers most from his time on Earth, and his answer surprises you. The night has deepened into its most tender blue. You and Jesus now lie side by side, heads tilted toward the sky, as if stargazing were a liturgy. There is no urgency, no lingering echo of anxiety, just space, spaciousness, a holy stretch of time unmeasured by clocks. You turn your head slightly and ask, what do you remember most? From down here? He doesn't answer right away. Doesn't fill the quiet with divinity or doctrine. He just exhales slowly, eyes tracing some far-off constellation. Then gently, the dust. You blink. The dust. He nods. Not the sermons, not the miracles. The dust. The way it clung to my feet after long walks. The way it rose when children ran toward me. The way it felt between my fingers when I traced names in the dirt. He pauses, then adds, the earth remembered me not as king, but as companion. You wait unsure whether to speak. He continues, there was a woman in Bethany. She wasn't named in the scrolls. Every day she'd sweep the outside of her doorway. And every day she'd leave a small pile of dust untouched, just in case I passed by. She called it welcoming ground. You smile, like preparing a throne. He chuckles, more like offering a seat. Another breeze drifts through the clearing. The fig tree above you lets go of another leaf. It lands softly on his robe. And bread, he adds suddenly. I remember how every home had a different flavor, different grain, some burned, some soft. But each one offered like treasure. You look at him. You're not going to say resurrection. He smiles, eyes soft. That was for you. But what I held most dearly were the ordinary things. He leans back and closes his eyes. The warmth of a stone in morning light. Laughter at crowded tables. Someone sharing their only blanket. The way strangers softened when I called them by name. He opens his eyes again, glancing toward you. You want to know what heaven envies about earth. You nod. He whispers, the way a tired soul still chooses kindness when no one is watching. A silence follows, not heavy sacred. You realize something you'd never considered. Perhaps heaven does not just marvel at miracles, but kneels in reverence at small faithfulness. Jesus rolls onto his side, propping his head up on one hand. You think your daily life is mundane, but heaven sees every overlooked act, every dish washed, every sigh released without bitterness. every time you didn't lash out when you could have. You chuckle. So dust and dishes. He laughs gently. Yes, and tea brewed for a friend, and socks given in secret, and prayers whispered into pillows. These are the echoes I still hear. The stars above feel a little closer now, not blazing, but attentive, like witnesses. You close your eyes, and somehow knowing that the Son of God treasures dust more than gold makes you feel like your ordinary, anxious, aching life might just be the holiest thing of all. He invites you to stand and look back, not at your sins, but at your endurance. The night air is calm now, the kind of calm that arrives only after honesty has made its home and fear has run out of things to say. Jesus rises slowly, dusting off his robe. He offers his hand. "Come," he says. You take it and stand. He leads you to a rise, a small mossy hill just beyond the clearing. It isn't high, but it opens the view enough for you to see the winding path behind you. The fig trees, the pool with its flickering flame, the circle of stone pillars, even the worn trail where your steps once stumbled. "Look," he says softly, but not to scold. "This is not about sin." You hesitate. Then, "What is it about endurance?" he says. "The holy art of not quitting." You breathe in the view. It's quiet, still, but alive. People love to track their sins, he says. They journal them, fear them, frame them as disqualifiers. He turns toward you, but very few pause to marvel at their endurance. You blink. I never thought to. He gestures toward a section of path where the stones were uneven. You remember tripping there, skinning your emotional knees. You kept walking, he says. Another bend where fog once confused you. You didn't stop. A place where your footsteps vanished, too tired, too defeated to move forward. You still came back. You glance at him, but it didn't feel faithful. It just felt tired. He smiles. Sometimes the holiest thing you'll ever do is keep showing up tired. Then he steps behind you, placing both hands on your shoulders. Now look again, not with judgment, but with awe. You inhale, eyes softening. The trail you walked is not pristine. It's smudged, cracked, overgrown in places. But it exists, and every inch of it was walked by you. There's a scroll fragment Jesus says, once buried beneath the temple stones. It was never canonized, but I remember it. He leans in and whispers the words like a lullaby. Blessed are those whose footprints remain, even if their faith felt forgotten. You feel your chest tighten, not in shame, but in recognition. This, he says, gesturing at your journey, is not the path of the perfect. It's the path of the persevering. You whisper, but I didn't always believe. He squeezes your shoulder gently. But you always returned, even if just to sit quietly in the same room. A pause. Then he adds, and don't think heaven didn't notice. Every limp, every prayer muttered in doubt. Every time you held someone else up while you were unraveling. You look once more. Your past isn't a list of regrets anymore. It's a field of survived storms. He lets go of your shoulders and stands beside you again. You are not impressive because you are spotless. You are beloved because you endured. The wind shifts slightly, and you notice something you hadn't before. Tiny lights along the path. Flickers, glows, like lanterns left by the Spirit illuminating every place you once thought was failure. They were altars, even the dark corners, especially the dark corners. And as you stand on that hilltop, hand in his, you begin to bless your own journey, not for what it lacked, but for what it lasted. He teaches you how to bless your own soul, gently, awkwardly, like someone learning to sing for the first time. The air is hushed atop the mossy rise, as if the trees and stars have leaned in to listen. Jesus kneels not in worship, but in invitation, as if to say, now it's your turn. You look at him uncertain. me. He nods. Yes. Tonight I want you to bless yourself. You hesitate. That feels strange. He smiles softly. It should. Most holy things do it first. You glance at your hands, unsure of what to say or do. You've spoken blessings over meals, over friends, over hurting strangers on the internet. But not over yourself. It's always felt like someone else's job, someone holier, someone not still healing. Jesus motions gently toward your heart. Try it, even if your voice shakes. You inhale slowly, then place a hand over your chest. It trembles slightly. He says, "Start with this. I bless the parts of me that still feel afraid." You whisper it uncertain. But the moment the words leave your lips, something quiet stirs like soft wind lifting an old curtain in your soul. Now he says the parts that feel behind. You take a deeper breath. I bless the parts of me that feel like they're running out of time. Your voice is steadier now. Good, he says. And the parts that can't forgive themselves yet. Your eyes brim. I bless the parts of me still learning how to let go. The trees around you remain still, not from disinterest, but reverence. Like they've seen centuries of souls, but rarely one daring to speak life over itself. There's a forgotten proverb Jesus says, once whispered by early desert mothers, "A soul cannot bloom in soil cursed by its own voice." You've watered your spirit with shame for years. Tonight, let blessing be your rain. You close your eyes and begin again, not performing, just naming. I bless the part of me that feels like too much. I bless the part that feels like never enough. I bless the quiet ache that no one sees. Jesus listens silent and still, as if your words are composing new psalms into the air itself. You open your eyes. He nods. There it is. That's what healing sounds like when it speaks in your own accent. You laugh softly, shakily. And now he says the final line. You look at him unsure. What is it? He leans close and whispers it into your ear like a secret. I bless the one I've been becoming, even when I didn't know that's who I was. You repeat it, tears gentle now, not sharp. Something in your chest feels lighter, not because all pain is gone, but because you finally let compassion speak over it. Jesus sits beside you again. You don't have to wait for me to pronounce the sacred over you. I already did at creation, at the cross. At every moment you mistook survival for failure. You breathe in the starlit air, hands still pressed to your heart. This is what it means to anoint yourself, not with oil, but with kindness. And the heavens, they respond with silence, not because they're empty, but because your blessing was enough. He walks you to a gate that doesn't open not yet, and explains why some answers are sacredly delayed. The path curves once more this time, narrowing between two rows of tall olive trees whose limbs seem older than stone. Their leaves shimmer silver in the moonlight, brushing softly as you pass. Ahead, at the end of this quiet corridor, stands a small gate of dark wood and iron. It isn't grand, no carvings, no inscription, just a gate, closed. You approach it with a strange mixture of hope and dread. Jesus stops beside you, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. This, he says gently, is the gate you've been asking about. You look at it. I don't understand. He nods. You've prayed to walk through it. Again and again, memories flood your chest, that job, that relationship, that healing you begged for. The dream you watched fade like mist, the silence that followed. You whisper, why didn't it open? Jesus doesn't rush to answer. He places one hand on the gate, not to push it, but to honor it. Some gates stay closed. He says not to punish, but to preserve. You frown. Preserve what he turns to you fully now. Timing, formation, 1,000 unseen threads that had to be woven before the next part could begin. You glance away. It felt like rejection. His voice softens. I know. Closed doors always feel personal. Then he leans slightly closer, voice low and kind. But tell me, did you grow in the waiting? You pause. You want to resist. But the truth humbles you. Yes, you whisper. Not always gracefully, but yes. Jesus smiles. Then the gate already served its purpose. He steps to the side, motioning for you to sit. You lower yourself onto a flat stone just across from the gate. He sits beside you. There's a midrash. He says that claims every unanswered prayer becomes a beam in the architecture of the next world. Not wasted, repurposed. You blink at the gate again this time, not with yearning, but curiosity. He adds some gates open when you're ready. Others open when the world is. And a few will open only in the next life because what's behind them is too bright for this one. You nod quiet. Jesus reaches into his robe and pulls out a small key, not ornate, not flashy. He presses it into your palm. This is not to unlock it, he says. It's to remind you that I hold the timing. You feel the metal cool, smooth, real. Do you trust me? He asks. You look at him. I want to. That's enough, he says. Trust doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just sitting beside a gate without trying to break it. A breeze sighs through the olive trees. You turn to him. Will it open someday? He smiles. That's not the right question. You tilt your head. The better question, he says, is who am I becoming while it stays closed? You lean back against the tree behind you. And for the first time, the gate doesn't mock you. Feels like part of the journey, not the missing piece. You hold the key gently, not to use, but to remember that the one who walks with you doesn't need it to stay close. He shows you a page from a book in heaven, a moment from your life recorded with such tenderness it silences your shame. The olive trees whisper above you, their leaves trembling like tiny silver tongues. Jesus stands, brushes off his robe, and reaches into the inner fold of his garment. When his hand emerges, it holds a single page glowing faintly, but not blinding. No gold, no glitter, just warmth. He doesn't speak right away, just hands it to you. You hesitate before taking it, afraid of what it might say. Is it my story, you ask? He nods once, one moment of it. You take it carefully. The page is cool, yet pulsing with something alive. The letters aren't ink, they shimmer like dew, struck by sunrise. As you read, your eyes widen. It's not a moment you expected, not your best, not your bravest, not the time you fed someone or forgave someone or said a perfect prayer. It's the day you sat in your car too long after work, hands trembling on the steering wheel, whispering, I can't do this anymore, and still somehow driving home. You feel your breath catch. Jesus kneels beside you, watching your face. You thought that moment was small, he says gently. But heaven didn't. You shake your head. I was falling apart. He nods, and you still chose to keep going. You stare down at the page. No judgment, no commentary, just a sacred witness. There's a teaching, he says, softly hidden in an Ethiopian text few have read. It says, God does not weigh the size of deeds, but the depth of surrender inside them. You look back down at the page, and somehow, what once felt like failure begins to feel like faithfulness in disguise. Tears come quietly. I thought you recorded the good parts, you whisper. He smiles. What makes you think that moment wasn't good? You can't answer. He reaches out gently, placing a finger under your chin to lift your gaze. We never needed you to be perfect. Just present. And you were. He lets the silence breathe around the words. No rushing. And for what it's worth, he adds that page. It's one of my favorites. You let the page rest against your heart. It fades not into disappearance, but into memory, like ink absorbed by spirit. and the shame you didn't even realize was still clinging to your ribs, it finally loosens. Jesus stands again, offering his hand. You take it, and as you rise, you feel a new kind of strength, not loud, not public, but quiet and rooted. You didn't have to be extraordinary. You just had to stay. And heaven noticed. You ask if he'll stay with you tomorrow, not just in dreams, but when the ache returns. The path begins to slope downward now, softly, guiding you back towards something that feels like waking. The stars have begun their slow retreat, and the fig trees glow faintly, as if warmed from within. You walk beside Jesus in a hush, not because there's nothing left to say, but because the night has become a kind of sanctuary. Still, one question rises in you, like steam from a still pool. You don't know why it waited until now, but it finally escapes your lips. Will you stay with me tomorrow? He turns his head, gently listening. You continue. Not just here, not just in dreams, but when I wake up and the ache comes back, the anxiety, the fog, and the laundry piles up, when I scroll too long and feel empty, when prayers feel like echoes. He stops walking. You stop too. I know you're with me, you say. I know that. But sometimes, it doesn't feel like enough. I want to feel you. When the sacred quiet is gone and I'm just brushing my teeth again. Jesus doesn't look surprised. He simply steps closer. Then, without asking, he wraps his arms around you. It's not dramatic. No lightning. No cinematic music. Just warmth, honest, complete whole. I never left, he whispers. Even in the places where you couldn't sense me. Especially there. You feel your shoulders soften. But what if I forget this, you ask? Voice muffled. What if I slip back into the chaos and numbness? He pulls back just enough to look into your eyes. Then I'll remind you. Through beauty, through memory, through a stranger's kindness, through a lyric at the right time, through the way the light hits your wall in the afternoon. You exhale shakily. You really do that. He smiles. I've never stopped. There's a silence. Then you whisper, will I always need nights like this? He considers, then answers with the question of his own. Would you judge a garden for needing rain again? You almost laugh through your tears. Touché. He places one hand over your heart. I don't expect you to walk every day like this night never ended. I expect you to remember that it did. You nod, letting that sink in. You don't have to carry tonight. Just recall it. Like a lighthouse in your back pocket. He continues tomorrow when the world starts again, when alarms beep and inboxes fill you might forget my nearness. That's okay. He leans in forehead, nearly touching yours. I'll still be brushing your soul's hair behind its ears, still folding peace into the folds of your hours. You smile faintly, even during errands. He grins, especially during errands. The stars blink slower now. The breeze cools. And for the first time in a long while, the idea of tomorrow doesn't feel like a threat, but a continuation. You reach for his hand. He squeezes it once, and without another word, you begin walking again, not away from him, but with him toward a morning that already knows who walks beside you. He walks you through your future not with details, but with peace. The sky ahead is softening now, that velvet pre-dawn blue, where stars begin to dim, not because they're finished, but because something new is rising. Jesus walks beside you in silence. For a time, steps matching yours. You both know this sacred dream is nearing its close. Still, there's one more thing your heart longs to ask. Can you show me what's ahead? You whisper. He doesn't answer right away, just watches a single leaf float down from a fig tree and land perfectly on a stone. You're asking for clarity, he says softly, but what you really need is companionship. You look at him unsure. He continues. The If I gave you the blueprint, the full schedule, the outcomes, the twists, you'd either try to rush ahead or hide. You smile faintly. Fair. But he says, turning toward you, I can walk you through your future. Not with specifics, but with presence. He gestures ahead, and suddenly you're no longer in the fig grove. You're walking through a faint series of scenes, not memories, not visions, but impressions. Shadows of what might be. You see a table with laughter, a storm with your name in it, a hospital hallway, a morning on a balcony with coffee and a long exhale, a failure, a phone call, a forgiveness. Each image appears like smoke, then fades. You glance at him. Are these real? They're possibilities, he says. But every one of them holds this constant. He opens his arms. I am there. You watch the images pass again, but now he's in all of them. Sometimes beside you, sometimes ahead. Once in the background, holding something that looked suspiciously like your lost piece. Even the hard moments you ask, especially those, he says, they don't scare me, they prepare you. You exhale slowly. He steps beside you again. There's an ancient prayer, he says, buried in a cave near Mount Nebo. It was etched into a stone cup by a nameless shepherd. He quotes it in a voice almost too soft to hear. I do not ask for sight beyond today, only feet that find your shadow in every hour. You feel tears rise, not because you're afraid, but because peace is somehow holding your future more gently than you ever have. Will I make it, you ask? He smiles not as God Almighty, but as a friend who's walked ahead and back again. You already are. He stops at a bend in the path. The fig tree's thin. The morning breeze begins. You sense it, the dream is ending. But something in you feels fuller now. Not because you've been shown everything, but because you've been reminded that you'll never be alone. Jesus turns toward you one last time in this sacred journey, hand resting over his heart. Your future isn't something I wait for you at, he says. It's something I walk with you through. And as the morning edges in, you find that you no longer need to see what's coming. You just need to keep walking. Trust that each step ahead already echoes with grace. The wind quiets, the stars exhale, and Jesus stays with you until your breath slows into sleep. You're standing now at the edge of something, not a cliff, not a gate, but a threshold too soft for words. The grove behind you is dimming gently, as if the night itself is bowing out with reverence. Jesus remains beside you, but his voice has lowered like a lullaby, meant only for you. Tonight wasn't meant to fix everything. He says only to remind you that you're never walking alone. You nod, eyes heavy. Your limbs are soft now, like candle wax warming and melting into stillness. The ache hasn't vanished, but it no longer rules the room. It hums now like a familiar song, rewritten in a gentler key. The fig leaves overhead have stilled, no longer rustling, just resting. Jesus kneels and unties your sandals. You want to protest, but he hushes you with a glance. Even God enjoys tucking his children in. You chuckle faintly, a sound almost too quiet to hear. He sets your sandals beside a small stone and helps you lie down. The moss beneath is soft, cool, forgiving, like sleep woven from grace. He takes his robe and folds it, places it beneath your head. Not because you can't sleep without me, he whispers, but because I want to be here when you do. The stars overhead are now pale ghosts of themselves, fading kindly into the coming day. You blink up at him one last time, your voice slow, slurred with peace. Will you be here when I wake up? Jesus doesn't nod. He simply smiles, places two fingers gently against your temple and whispers, even in dreams I walk the halls of your heart. And then without fanfare, without finality, he closes your eyes with the back of his hand. The scene begins to blur, Not disappear, but soften. The trees lose their edges. The pond becomes a smear of moonlight. The stones exhale. Your thoughts unwind like ribbon. Even the flame beneath the water flickers slower now, no longer dancing, just breathing. And Jesus, he stays. He hums something ancient, a song without language known only to stars and sleeping souls. A melody first sung over the formless deep, now hummed beside you. Your breath slows, your heart loosens. Your soul, once tangled in worry, now floats. You are safe, you are held, you are known fully and without condition. And as the veil of night draws its final curtain, one truth remains wrapped around you like a blanket woven from starlight. You are not alone. End of script. Sweet dreams.